Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is parallel in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 11, Ramen Dates and the Best Dango in Konoha. Chapter text. The streets of Konoha were busy, civilians and ninja alike going home for the evening. There is chatter, the voices loud to be heard over the crowd. Naruto ducked and dodged around them, hurrying toward Ichiraku. Iruka-sensei had found him earlier while walking back from a mission, inviting the blonde to dinner. It had been a while, since before the graduation exam, and he was excited. Kakashi even let him out of training early so he had time to get there. The Chiryunin was standing against the wall of the shop, a scroll unrolled in his hands. The Hokage had asked Iruka's opinion on next year's curriculum, giving him a scroll to look over. He had plenty of ideas, plenty of changes he wanted to make. How many of them would pass the Hokage's scrutiny he wasn't sure. Hey! Hey! Iruka-sensei! Naruto's loud voice broke through the noise of the crowd. Iruka looked up and smiled, putting the scroll away. The boy had dirt on his face and on the front of his shirt. Iruka was shocked at his lack of orange. Am I late? Where is your outfit? The boy kicked the ground with his sandal, suddenly looking sheepish. I had to get some new clothes. Kaka-sensei bought these for me. I still have it, but right now it's dirty. There were a couple of ninjas who left the shop, laughing as they went. Naruto grabbed Iruka's wrist and pulled him inside, taking the stools before anyone else did. Iruka kept looking at Naruto, still surprised to see him in something not orange. Instead, he had black 3/4 length pants and a deep blue short-sleeved shirt. His headband, which was previously Iruka's, had a couple of new scratches on the shiny metal. Something resembling a tattoo was decorating his left arm, carefully written runes and symbols fanning out around a spiral. Naruto had always been thin, smaller than he should have been. A steady diet of salty ramen not putting any substantial weight on him. Now, however, his muscles were more defined, his body filling out. He sat up straighter, acted more maturely. Something had changed in that boy's life, something major. So, how have you been? I haven't seen you in over a month. Iruka asked between bites of ramen. Tuka was hovering above them, watching Naruto and Iruka's interactions. Tuka put his elbows on the counter, leaning forward. A lot has happened, hasn't it, kid? Yeah. Naruto's laugh echoed through the shop. There's been so much. So, first I've been living with Kaka-sensei. Me and Sasuke, actually. It all started because someone broke into my apartment, destroyed everything. Sasuke was angry when he saw it. Like, really angry. But Kaka-sensei told me I can stay with him. Sasuke, I'm not sure why, but he just started staying there, too. We sleep on futons in the living room. Sakura lives with Ino, too. Something about her parents, but we never got the whole story. There was a long pause as Iruka took everything in. Tuka shook his head, using a pair of chopsticks to throw a couple of pieces of pork in Naruto's ramen. The boy looked up and smiled. Iruka stared, dumbly, at his previous student. Kakashi, he's letting you both live with him? Like, he offered. Naruto nodded. Wow. So, you and Sasuke are getting along now. We're friends. Still rivals though. Naruto paused to slurp up some noodles. He's not so bad when he's not being a jerk. He's been helping me in Taijutsu. I'm so much better. And, oh. You should see Sakura. She sent Sasuke flying into a tree one time. Iruka-sensei, it was awesome. By the time Naruto was on his 4th bowl of ramen, Iruka still wasn't entirely sure he'd taken it all in. The fact that Kakashi took in 2 boys, took them into his apartment, buying them food and clothes and making sure they have a place to sleep, was throwing him. The Jounin argued against having Genin for years. Iruka would know, he was there for most of the debates. He watched as Kakashi clung to straws, thinking of every excuse he could to change the Hokage's mind. It wasn't until Sasuke came of age that Sandaime refused to take no for an answer. Kakashi was the only person left who could teach the boy how to use the Sharingan. At that point, Kakashi had no choice in the matter. Kakashi's apartment isn't very big, is it? Naruto shrugged. We make it work. We usually only are there in the evenings, you know. Normally we are training. Like, a lot. Sensei said he wants us to be ready for anything. Sakura thinks it's so we can take the Churyunin exams early. It was a strong possibility, Iruka thought. Technically, Kakashi's job would be over as soon as they became Churyunin. But with him taking the kids in, surely, he wouldn't just kick them out as soon as their rank changed. Surely. Right? Once they were done eating, Iruka walked Naruto back to Kakashi's apartment. He made small talk, acting as if he just wasn't done talking to the blonde. Instead, he just wanted to talk to Kakashi. Naruto was important to him, he wanted to make sure there was no reason to worry. The boy chatted the entire time, telling him about the seal on his arm, about the paper bombs he can create, about him learning wind affinity. He talked about Sasuke's fire and lightning, about him considering Kenjutsu, that he's still upset he can't activate the Sharingan. He told Iruka about Sakura's newfound earth and water ability, how Kakashi couldn't put a Raikiri through her rock wall, about her training at the hospital, and her healing Sasuke's hand. Iruka barely got a word in, just nodding and humming at the right times. It was so much to take in such a small amount of time to do so. Naruto jogged up the stairs and opened the door, yelling loudly in the apartment that he was home. Iruka didn't know that, before, Naruto said that same thing to himself every single time he came back to an empty, lonely apartment. He didn't know that the boy relished every time Sasuke growled at him for yelling because at least it meant someone was waiting for him. He wasn't alone anymore. Sasuke was on the couch, his legs curled under him, reading a Fuinjutsu book. He looked freshly showered, his hair hanging nearly straight under the weight of the water. Looking up when Naruto's loud voice echoed through the room, he frowned. Shut up, moron. Hey. Don't tell me to shut up. Why are you reading my book? Naruto kicked off his sandals and flopped on the couch beside Sasuke. Sasuke scoffed, pushing Naruto with his shoulder. It's Kakashi's, not yours, loser. The book jostled as Naruto bumped his shoulder against Sasuke's. We should work on Genjutsu scrolls. Yeah. Naruto nodded before flipping a couple of pages ahead. He tapped the page, drawing Sasuke's attention to it. We'd have to start with this as a base. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and the creaking of a door, before Kakashi appeared in the living room. Iruka was surprised to see no mask on him, just a simple shirt and sweatpants. In all the time Iruka has known the man, he'd never seen Kakashi's face. As soon as the Jounin saw him standing there, a smile appeared. Yo. He motioned toward the kitchen. How was your ramen date? The Churyunin made himself at home, taking a seat at the kitchen island. Informational. Iruka motioned toward Naruto. He's told me a lot. Like how he and Sasuke are living here, now. When Naruto had said about going to dinner with Iruka, Kakashi knew this conversation would happen. He didn't blame the teacher. Iruka had done a lot with Naruto over the years, especially after the graduation exam incident. The problem was that Iruka followed the rules, much like Kakashi had in his previous life. If Iruka could have taken the boy in, he might have. Until Naruto became a genin, he was a ward of the village. Iruka had no say, no decision, in the boy's life. Kakashi started the kettle and stayed turned away from Iruka for a long time. He is the first to admit how different he is now than he was before. It doesn't surprise him that people took notice. How long had he argued with Sandaime about taking genin? But when Sasuke came of age, he had run out of excuses. Now, instead of the hardened Umbu commander, Kakashi wondered what Iruka saw. What do you want to know? Kakashi treads slow, barely putting a toe in the water of this conversation. There was no answer until the kettle whistled and Kakashi turned around. If you would have told me, let's say a year ago, that you would have 2 genin in your house, living here, I would have gotten myself checked for brain damage. Iruka turned to look at the boys on the couch, sitting close together talking about putting a genjutsu in a seal. But it's happening, here, in front of me. And I still can't believe it. He turned back to Kakashi. What changed? Handing the cup of tea to Iruka, Kakashi smirked. A lot has changed. Movement on the couch drew his attention. Naruto had reached for some paper and a pen, quickly sketching a markup of what they were talking about. Neither of them was paying attention to the adults. They were alone. Iruka. One is attention-starved and touch-starved. He is loud and in your face because then he's sure you're paying attention, not just writing him off like so many others have. The other lives with ghosts in his head and way too much on his shoulders. He's angry and deathly afraid to show any emotion or someone might think he's weak. His teacup hit the granite a little too hard, chipping at the base. Neither one of those kids got treated the way they deserved, got the help they needed, or got told the truth. Ah. Iruka sat his tea down gently. So, you did tell Naruto the truth, then? Kakashi paused, frozen, before slowly nodding. Iruka smirked. Knew it. That argument with Sandaime, does he know? No. Kakashi leveled a look at Iruka. And he doesn't need to. The Chunin held his hands up in surrender. Oh, I'm not telling him. I'm on your side. Iruka glanced at the boys, still having their heads together over a piece of paper, still not paying attention. I never thought I'd see those two actually being friendly. I'm pretty sure you worked a miracle, hey take. Kakashi laughed, the worry of what Iruka's intentions were put to rest. May need a bigger place, though. They can't stay on the floor forever. As Iruka drank the last of his tea, leaving the apartment with one final wave to the boys. Kakashi stood in the kitchen, elbows resting on the island, and watched them. Their heads together, black and blonde, both trying so hard to create a seal that could cause the victim to be stuck in a genjutsu. Iruka was right, they were friendly. But it was more than that, wasn't it? Only Kakashi had seen the soft side of Sasuke when Naruto had a panic attack, or when the apartment was destroyed, how angry and seething he was. Only Kakashi saw Naruto being a grounding presence in Sasuke's life, keeping him present, in the here and now, reminding him he's not alone. No, they aren't just friendly. They are friends. He watched as Naruto drew symbols on the paper, tongue peeking out between his lips. Sasuke pointed at the book and then to the paper, gently bumping their shoulders together. Naruto looked at him and smiled, seeing a smile mirrored back. The two futons spread out on the floor drew his attention next. Iruka was right. They couldn't sleep on the living room floor forever. They deserved to have their own bedrooms, their own space. Everything those boys owned was in bags and backpacks and boxes, kept hidden away and out of the road. He tapped his fingers on the granite. Taking the boys out of the village proper might do them some good. Give them some space from the hate and the ghosts. He stood up and walked toward the boys, his kids, the ones he'd vowed to take care of. A house in the woods, maybe? 3 bedrooms, definitely. Enough room for the kids to train and grow, far enough away from civilization their ninjutsu wouldn't bother the neighbors, but close enough for supplies to be easily accessible. Kakashi had the fleeting thought of his childhood home, of the land it sits on and the dojo his father had built a mere year before his death. He didn't want to take Sasuke from one place full of ghosts to another. However, there may be another way. Shikaku had every privacy seal in his office activated. A very haggard, overly exhausted Inoichi stood in front of him, his hands clutching a piece of paper. The man wouldn't talk unless the seals were glowing, lines and runes a rainbow on the wall. There was a pile of papers on his desk, mostly mission reports, that needed taking care of. But with his longtime teammate and friend standing in front of him, the look of pure joy at having solved a puzzle on his face, Shikaku let them sit. So, Shikaku motioned toward the paper in Inoichi's hands. What have we there? Ino solved it. She cracked the code, Shikaku. He handed over the solution. None of my analysts could do it, none of them. Ino did it in one night. The Jounin commander met his eyes, one eyebrow arched. I'm not kidding. Shikaku smirked. My son apparently has an IQ of over 200. Your daughter can solve cryptic messages in a few hours. Wonder what Chao's son can do. He looked at the paper, the code written among flowing and curly handwriting, a documented formula for deciphering the code. Left of the mountain? There's no entrance on that side. There are multiple entrances to the tunnels inside the mountain. Storage rooms, safes, the treasury, meeting rooms, and the hideout for the children in times of crisis all can be reached by the stairways decorating the stone. However, all of those entrances are around the middle of the mountain, all of them under the great stone faces. Even the only secret entrance, masked by a seal that could only be passed by someone holding a particular key in their hands, was directly behind the Hokage Tower. On either side of the mountain, there shouldn't be anything. That's what I thought, too. Inoichi scratched his chin. If this is to be taken seriously, then someone put a doorway in. Who would be able to hide such a doorway? Both men looked at each other, similar glints in their eyes. Then, simultaneously, they both said, Danzo. The best dango in town could be found in one place. 2 streets down from Ichiraku sat a small hole-in-the-wall shop ran by 2 older ladies. Sakura always had a sweet tooth, no matter how much her mother tried to guilt her out of it. Now, with her newfound freedom, Sakura happily led Ino there. She'd spun a tale to the blonde about the amazing dango sold there, about how the sweetened black sesame paste melted in your mouth. The women who owned the shop, Akari and Yua, stood behind the counter, giggling to each other. Sakura and Ino slid onto the stools, mouths watering at the smell wafting from behind the counter. Immediately, Akari recognized Sakura, a large smile coming over her face. Oh, Yua, look who's back. Yua turned around with a small bowl of red bean paste in her hands. Oh, Sakura. And she brought a friend. 2 plates of dango were sat in front of the girls, 2 sticks of 3 each. They were all different, all covered in a unique taste. As they ate, the 2 girls chatted. Ino was still talking about that scroll she'd decoded for her father. Sakura was excited about closing a large wound on her own. The 2 older women stood side by side, rolling the sweet rice balls and mixing up the toppings. A quick glance back by Yua, she saw the girls were involved in their own conversation, not paying any attention to the shop owners. She turned back to Akira and slowly laced their fingers together. They'd been together for 40 years. Where they're from, same-sex relationships weren't tolerated. When the 2 women had first came out, they'd been shunned, thrown out of their village. They traveled, no money to their names, barely into adulthood, alone. The world was cruel. They were stolen from, chased, attacked. Yua still had a scar on her thigh from a deep kunao slice. Eventually, they found a traveling caravan. A couple, man and wife, took them in, taught them about the world. Taught them how to make dango. Taught them that Konoha didn't care who you loved. The 2 women made a home there, made a life there, took over that couple's shop when they'd gotten too old to keep up. Ino glanced up, ready to ask for a glass of water when she saw the 2 older women holding hands. The way they looked at each other, the way they leaned toward each other, a gravitational pull, made Ino realize what she was looking at. She saw 2 women who were deeply in love. It wasn't the first time Ino had seen 2 women who were together, but those women were always young, giggling at the looks the men gave, putting on a show. These 2 were different. This wasn't a show at all, this was real, it lasted. Wrinkles crossed their faces, their hands. Their hair was gray. These were elder women who spent a lifetime together and were still in love. That's what I want. Ino mused out loud. Sakura looked up from her dango, following Ino's gaze. She saw the older women holding hands. To hold hands. Ino snorted. That too. No, I want a love like that. They've been together for 40 years, Sakura spoke soft and low, not to disrupt them. Can you imagine? Ino let the stick she was holding drop back on the plate. She could imagine that. She wanted that. To be so in love you want to spend every day with one person for 40 years. Yes, please. When she glanced at Sakura, the girl had a strange look on her face. What? Nothing. Just, never heard you talk about love like that before. When Ino blushed and looked away, Sakura hurriedly added, me, too. I mean, I never saw real love like that before I started coming here. My parents, well, it's not the same with them, yeah no. Yeah. Ino nodded. Never got to see my parents together. People say they were in love, though. The one picture I have of them, they did look happy. She shrugged. Pictures can lie, though. Ino put her chin in her hand, imagining the picture in her head. Her mom had died giving birth to her. It means a lot that her father took on being a single father while grieving his wife. She could recognize it now, the nights when Inoichi drank a little more than usual or locked himself in his bedroom with a box of pictures. Those were the nights when her mother's memory became too much for him. Sometimes, when Ino would smile a certain way, or laugh, the man got a faraway look in his eye. She may look a lot like her father, but her mother was mixed in there. Yua brought them each over a glass of water. You girls look so deep in thought. Dango is supposed to make you happy, not like you're reliving a bad dream. Sakura smiled. Actually, we were talking about you and Akira. We want to be as happy as you two when we grow up. The two women looked at each other. Well, young ladies, let me give you both some advice. Marry your best friend. Nothing else matters, not money or status. The only thing that matters is love. And who could possibly love you more than your best friend? Akira leaned over the counter as her partner talked, taking in the girl's expressions. Do not become your parents. She added. My mother married my father for money. That was it. They barely looked at each other, each had lovers on the side. They didn't even sleep in the same room. That's not love. That's an obligation. My parents were an arranged marriage. A business merger, that's what their marriage was. Two rich families forcing their children into marriage to mask a business contract. They hated each other, despised each other. I was created because they were threatened to make a baby or be written out of the will. Yua shook her head, looking angry. I was raised by a nanny, not by my parents. They barely looked at me. I was just a reminder of something they hated. When we met, it was like the stars shined just for us. Akira smiled, brushing a piece of hair off Yua's face. Love at first sight. You old sap. Yua slapped her hand away. It was terrifying, that's what it was. You're taught you have to marry a man, have children, be stuck in the kitchen for the rest of your life. But I never felt anything for the boys. Not the way the other girls did. She rolled her eyes. Yes, I will admit, seeing Akira was the first time I realized why boys didn't do it for me. Akira beamed. Told you. On the walk home, Sakura told Ino the story of how the two women got to Konoha. She recited it just as they told it to her. Sakura remembered that night, remembered the way she ran from her home, tired of arguing with her parents, and trying to find some solace in tooth-rotting sweetness. She found it in a small shop with two lovely women offering the best dango she'd ever eaten. Ino was silent. The sun was setting over the mountain, shadows crawling over the buildings. Streetlights flickered on around them as Sakura kept talking. Their story was one of trial and tribulation. Luck was on their side throughout their harrowing journey, seeing as how neither of them died. She wondered, not for the first time, what her mom was like. Would anything had been different if she lived? A warm hand brushed against hers, bringing Ino out of her thoughts. Sakura was looking at her, concerned. Ino smiled, small and sad, before looking back up at the sunset. The orange-purple of the sky gave the stone faces a violet hue. She wondered if her father was home, yet. There were so many questions in her head about that scroll. The hand brushed against hers again. Without really thinking, Ino linked their fingers together. It felt right. It felt whole. Sakura's eyes shimmered in the streetlights when Ino looked at her. You were right. That really was the best dango in Konoha. Their hands were slightly swinging between them. I hope Dad is home, I really want to ask him about that scroll. Will he actually tell you? Sakura knew what Inoichi did, what position he held. A large percentage of his work was classified. Ino laughed. Oh, Sakura, you have so much to learn. If that girl thought Inoichi had never told his daughter classified information before, she would be sorely mistaken. Ino knew a lot of things she wasn't supposed to know. Sakura tilted her head toward Ino. Tell me everything. Ino's laugh echoed off the buildings. The lights were still on in the house when Inoichi finally crawled home. His meeting with Shikaka went long. They needed help. They needed other ninjas they could trust to be part of it. There was a very short list, all of which needed to be vetted considerably. Inoichi was tired, mentally exhausted, and just wanted to go to bed. Instead, he was greeted by his daughter and her pink-haired roommate. His eyes met his daughter's and just shook his head. She looked way too excited to get in trouble. You realize that scroll wasn't for you to solve, right? You realize I solved it in a few hours, right? Ino shot back. You might as well admit it, Dad. I am the best analyst you have. You trained me this way. He laughed. She was right. She was always right. I also trained you in stealth. Part of that was how to be silent. I can see that lesson didn't get through. He put his hands on her shoulders and leaned down. Ino, my darling, I am proud of you. You have no idea how proud of you I am, my beautiful flower. I need you to listen to me and listen carefully. Do not get involved with this. This is something you need to leave to the adults. Shikaku and I are working together. This is Umbu level, dear. I don't want you to get hurt. Promise me, Ino, Sakura. Promise me you will both stay out of this. He leveled them both with a stare. Yes, sir. Sakura nodded. Ino stared back, challenging it. Finally, she rolled her eyes. Yes, Dad. Thank you. Inoichi let out a breath. Now, get to bed. You both have missions in the morning. Once the girls were in their room, and Inoichi was alone in his bedroom, he sat on the edge of his bed and put his head in his hands. What could get uncovered if this lead pans out could be life-altering. All of the rumors, the shady dealings, could finally be held in account. Inoichi threw himself back on the bed, pinching the bridge of his nose. His head was aching. He needed a shower and his pajamas, but he couldn't bring himself to move. The best ninja they had on their shortlist was Kakashi. That man had 2 preteen boys staying with him, not to mention being a Jounin sensei. He was a busy man. But one mention of Danzo's name, and the man would jump at a chance to take him down. Inoichi remembered it was Kakashi who saved Sandame's life when Danzo attempted to have him assassinated. He remembered it was Kakashi who pushed for the man to be held accountable. He knew Kakashi would still be angry about no justice has happened. Inoichi sat up, forcing himself to walk to the shower. Tomorrow, he would talk to Kakashi. Right now, he wanted to pretend his daughter would keep herself out of this, live in the dream world where his daughter actually listened when he talked, and go to sleep. The moment his damp head hit the pillow, Inoichi was out, snoring. Across the hall, Sakura and Ino had their feet tangled together, both girls sound asleep. Chapter 12, Some Things Don't Stay Secret. Shikamaru yawned, his arms behind his head. It was their first mission out of the village, just deliver a scroll to a mining village about half a day away. Asuma was in the front, chatting with Koji about his training with Sasuke. That left Shikamaru and Ino bringing up the back, mostly ignored by the other two. So, Ino walked a little closer to him. I may have learned another secret. Shikamaru slid his eyes to her, then back to the scenery in front of him. 22-65-18 safe under desk all info there left mountain left right red door. A dark eyebrow arched. The thing is, though, there's no door on the left side of the mountain. He dropped his arms, shoving his hands in his pockets. Not a public one. They would know. Ino had borrowed the tunnel schematics when they were younger. Shikamaru had it memorized, he knew every entrance, every crossroad, every turn. No matter which door they entered, those directions would not lead to a red door. The closest thing to the left side of the mountain is the prison. There are woods behind there, right? Maybe it's hidden in the woods. Ino had a mental picture of the map of Konoha. Behind the prison was a patch of trees clustered tight together. They hug the base of the mountain, blocking the view from afar. However, they are well patrolled, Umbu crisscrossing through there, watching all sides of the prison. Shikamaru shrugged, feigning nonchalance. In reality, his interest was piqued. Ino could read him like a book, she smirked. There was a long pause, nothing but the crunching of the dirt and pebbles under their sandals. You're troublesome. The boy sighed. What else have you heard? The name Danzo. Ino put her hands behind her back, practically skipping in glee. They always did make great partners in crime. Heard of him? Humming, Shikamaru thought back. His father had said it before, he could hear Shikaku's bored tone drawling out the name. Nothing specific came to mind, however. Sometimes his father would come home, still worked up over a mission gone wrong, or a piece of information that didn't make sense, and just talk to himself. Mumbling over a shogi board. Forgetting to censor himself in front of Yoshino and just spilling village secrets. It was Shikaku's way to vent the stress, and it was also a way for Shikamaru to hear many things he shouldn't have. Ahead of them, Asuma suddenly stopped, holding a hand up, signaling them to stop. Shikamaru grabbed a kunao, preparing himself for a fight. "I'll check it out," he whispered to Ino. "Let you know, okay?" With her own kunao gripped in her hands, Ino shot Shikamaru a bright smile. "You're the best." Asuma sent off a hand motion, the three genins standing back to back. Two ninjas jumped from the bushes, sidestepping the jounin and heading straight for the kids. One headed straight for Koji, seeing the portly kid and immediately expecting him to be weak. He was very wrong. It took 5 hits and the man went flying backward, breaking the thin tree in half. A combination of Shikamaru and Ino finished the other one off. Asuma stood back, beaming in pride, as he took in the 2 rogue ninjas. Beaten and bloody, they were unconscious. What made him the proudest, however, was his usually timid Koji took on one by himself. All that training with Sasuke was definitely paying off. Koji turned around, scratching the back of his head. He looked so sheepish, so innocent, like he didn't just kick a ninja through a tree. Ino began laughing. Asuma followed suit. Clapping Shikamaru on the back, Asuma smiled wide. "I think you two should take some lessons from Koji." There was a vicious cycle in Konoha. The entire village was built upon secrets, lies, and half-truths. They compounded into a foundation hard as obsidian, a volcanic glass upon which more and more lies piled on. The secrets formed districts, the lies formed a prison and a police force, the half-truths built homes and apartments. Subterfuge and disloyalty infested the city like a plague, dragging people down, burying them in the graveyard or, if they're unlucky, trampled on the battlefield. In the ivory tower, sparkling in the sunlight with a wide hat and flowing cloak, sat the Hokage. The office he currently sat in, with the large oak desk stacked with scrolls and parchment, had a visitor. An old friend, one Sarutobi Hiruzen had known since the academy, one who had grown to become someone unrecognizable, stood in the room. Danzo had a presence, a dark aura that surrounds him and suffocates everyone in the vicinity. The man had done terrible things, dark and disturbing things. Hiruzen was the first to admit he'd let a lot slide. At first, he blamed his focus being on Orochimaru and the disturbing experiments the man was doing within his walls. Then he blamed the deaths of Yondaime and his wife, his subsequent return to leadership, and the rebuilding of a village. Truth be told, Hiruzen didn't want the can of worms arresting Danzo would open. Danzo is and always was, an opposing presence. He stood tall in the room, looming over the desk in his robe, half of his body hidden away. The cane in his hand was so polished it shined in the sunlight coming through the windows. "There are rumors, Sarutobi. Rumors that certain village secrets have been exposed." Hiruzen kept eye connection, barely blinking. "What secrets are those?" "Uchiha secrets." He tried to keep his face neutral. Danzo was testing him, trying to get him to crack. It couldn't be true. The Uchiha district massacre was as closely guarded as the Jinchuriki. Other than he, Danzo, and a select few Umbu, no one knew the truth of that night. And who would tell those secrets? There was a darkness that passed over the scarred face. Danzo's lips thinned, grimacing. "Shouldn't be that hard to find out." Sarutobi raised an eyebrow. "Being Hokage, one would think you'd want to know. But maybe you already know." "Why would I know, Danzo?" Sarutobi was growing tired of this line of questioning. "You think I ordered for this to be known?" "Of course not." The old man rubbed his temples. "If you think I know who has been running their mouths, then out with it." Danzo gave a humorless laugh. "I have a suspicion, of course." He paused, waiting for Hiruzen to say something, defend himself. The man didn't. Ah, keeping secrets again, are we? Yes, I am. I have been keeping secrets for years. That's what this job is, Danzo. Hiruzen slowly stood up, bracing his hands on the desk. Secrets upon secrets upon secrets. It's my job to protect this village from the unfavorable consequences that the decisions of others have caused. That's it. That's the driving force behind my decisions. He looked Danzo in his visible eye. You think you want this position so bad, but you don't understand what all it takes. There was a guttural growl from the man before he stood up straighter. Sarutobi, my position in this village is to save Konoha from itself. Sarutobi laughed, humorless and condescending. Yes, Danzo. Save this village. Bring it out of the darkness and into the light. Create your dream military village where you rule over all. I have brought peace. I have brought safety. I am what these people needed. He shook his head. Not some young kid with his grand ideas. We are steeped in tradition, rich with history, and this village will stay this way. Now, get out of my office. Don't come in here accusing me again. Danzo may have left the office, storming his way out in the stunted way he walks, but the conversation stayed with the Hokage for the rest of the day. The rumors were as dangerous as the truth, and if they were leaked, Hiruzen was honestly afraid of the backlash. He'd hid Danzo's involvement in the massacre well, kept him protected as well as he could. The papers were redacted, the folders hidden in the archive. The secrets were safe. Another layer in the putrid onion that was the underbelly of Konoha. He stood up, making his way to the double doors leading to his office. Outside, 2 Umbu agents greeted him, nodding and saluting. Hiruzen waved them off, heading toward the stairs and out onto the street. The Umbu would follow, they always did. And today they would follow him to the Jounin apartments. Sasuke and Naruto had left early that morning, meeting Shikamaru and Koji for taijutsu training. Even if the boys had the day off, a chance to relax, they chose to learn. It made their sensei proud. Kakashi busied himself with cleaning up, 2 preteen boys being their own kind of messy. The folders Kakashi saw the previous night was hidden, tucked away in the storage scroll designed by Naruto. It could only be opened by Sasuke's chakra, no one else could get past the seal. Even hidden inside a sealed scroll, Kakashi still wanted it hidden. A secret hiding place, a spot even his boys didn't know about, held his Umbu mask, uniform, and some personal items he'd kept from his father. Added to it was the scroll holding the Uchiha secrets. Another scroll, holding the items from Minato and Kushina safely behind another seal that only Naruto could access. No one could find them, no matter how hard they looked. Kakashi was sure of it. He'd just finished straightening the futons when he felt the Hokage's chakra signature approaching the apartment complex. It was customary to serve tea when someone of a higher position came into your home. The Hokage was about the highest one could get. Today, however, Kakashi didn't start any tea. Instead, he left the boys' things where they were, in the open and on display. He knew what the man approaching his door had done, the wrongs he'd never made right. Nothing that man could say would change his mind, he was going to do right by his boys, come hell or high water. A soft knock and the smell of tobacco were Kakashi's warning of what's to come. Opening the door, Kakashi smiled at the Hokage, waving him in. Sir. Kakashi. Hiruzen looked around, noticing the cramped surroundings, the boxes and bags against the wall, the 2 futons pushed together on the ground. I see those 2 have made themselves at home. This is their home, Kakashi said simply. Until we find a bigger one. He motioned toward the living room. They're going to need more space, room to grow. I'm looking. Kakashi leaned against the kitchen island. But you didn't come here to talk about their living conditions. It's much better than how Naruto was living, I assure you. Hiruzen was silent for a moment. Yes, I came here to discuss other matters. Sort of a continuation of our last conversation. He took a puff of his pipe. There have been rumors. Rumors of secrets being exposed. Kakashi fought the urge to roll his eyes. He knew his little visit to the archive wasn't found out. If it was, Kakashi would be surrounded by Umbu, handcuffed, and chakra blocked. No, this was about something else. Rumors about what, sir? Another puff of his pipe. What does Sasuke know about the Uchiha massacre? He paused, hoping Kakashi showed some outward signs, but the Jounin showed nothing. He was too well trained. There are people who seem to know information about Uchiha Itachi. From what little he says, it doesn't seem like he knows much. He knows it was his brother who committed the murders and that he's the only remaining Uchiha in Konoha. As for why it happened, all Itachi told him he was testing his abilities. Kakashi glanced at the futon the boy sleeps on, the place where he'd waken up from several nightmares over the month he'd been staying there. Sasuke has a ton of questions and no answers. Has he asked you for answers? Kakashi looked at Hiruzen, his jaw set. He has. I don't know any more than he does, so I've been no help. The lies slipped off of Kakashi's tongue like sweet honey. This man, the man Kakashi had protected from being assassinated, was accusing him of leaking village secrets. Hiruzen nodded, taking another puff from his pipe. You were teamed with Itachi during your stay at Umbu, correct? Of course, the man already knew the answer. He was fishing for a lie. Did you tell Sasuke that? Didn't think it mattered. I didn't know about Itachi's personal life, the boy was good at keeping secrets. Kakashi shrugged. None of what I know would help him with his questions. The Jounin was getting uneasy, tired of the conversation. If the Hokage was going to accuse him of something, Kakashi preferred the man just came out with it. I'm assuming you think I was the one spreading rumors, then. Of course not. Hiruzen lied like a pro. I trust that you, of all people, would understand the importance of keeping some things hidden. Being Umbu commander, you've had plenty of practice with that. He eyed Kakashi carefully. There are things neither Naruto nor Sasuke is ready to learn. But there will come a day when they are ready. And they will be angry to know it was hidden for so long. Hiruzen frowned. He pulled the pipe away from his mouth. Kakashi, I understand that Naruto already knows his status as Jinchuriki. He hasn't asked questions about it, although I'm sure he has them. Honestly, I hope he just forgets. Forgets. Kakashi nearly choked on his own saliva. You hope he forgets about a chakra demon sealed inside him. Hiruzen waved his hand in dismissal. The boy, he doesn't think like other shinobi. He tends to ignore what he doesn't understand. There it was. Laid out in front of him on a silver platter. A neon sign glaringly bright. Someone yelling from on top of the mountain. The looming fact that everyone in Konoha assumed Naruto was stupid, too stupid to understand what was going on inside him, around him, to him. Kakashi could have strangled the Hokage, slapped him across the face, screamed, and yelled. You're saying he's stupid? He's too idiotic to understand that the Kyuubi is trapped inside him. Are you serious, sir? Again, Kakashi towed the line of insubordination. He's not stupid. He learns differently, needs to feel and see what he's doing, but he's definitely not stupid. Looking Kakashi up and down, Hiruzen looked flabbergasted. He couldn't believe Kakashi, his model shinobi, was talking to him like that. I've never said Naruto is stupid. He's naive. Kakashi felt his blood pressure rising. Yes, he is. He was made that way. Do you know why Naruto failed a lot of the written exams in the academy? Because he taught himself to read and Iruka wrote in kanji the kid didn't understand. It's not that he didn't know the answer, he couldn't read the question. The stuff that kid does know, he completely learned on his own. No one taught him anything. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, sir, but I disagree with the way this boy was raised. He deserved more than that. You are treading a thin line, Kakashi. Hiruzen's eyes were drawn down, his jaw set. A very thin line. The man turned around, his robe swishing behind him. I'm going to assume you had nothing to do with the Uchiha rumors. I better not hear of any rumors involving Naruto. Once Hiruzen was gone, the door closed and Kakashi stood alone in his small apartment. He growled, throwing his head back. The man was aggravating. Slamming his fist on the granite counter, Kakashi tried to cool his temper. He needed out, needed fresh air and a run, needed to hit something, Konoha tree into splinters and wood shavings. Slipping out his window, Kakashi sprung from rooftop to rooftop, feeling the wind hitting his face, blowing his hair. He didn't stop until he reached the wall. Kicking off from the wall, his feet gripped to a nearby tree. He found a thick branch and sat down, picking the bark as his mind spun. The boys would be home soon. They'd be looking for dinner, looking for him. But right now, Kakashi needed to clear his head. There was a large chance this timeline wasn't going as well as he wanted it to. He couldn't hold his temper, couldn't hold in his thoughts and feelings like he used to. No longer could he be the good little lapdog he once was. That life he'd already lived out, already saw how it ended, learned the secrets. The new Kakashi wouldn't let his kids fall to the wayside anymore. No, he was changing the vicious cycle. A twig snapped below him, someone flickering into the woods. An Umbu, one he'd never seen before. No Konoha symbol on the mask, no definable characteristics. The Umbu glanced around. Kakashi could feel him sending out his chakra, feeling for a presence. They looked up. Kakashi waved at them. Yo! Why are you here, hey take? They set their stance, preparing for a fight. Kakashi wasn't doing anything wrong, why would they be assuming he was there for anything malicious? Playing aloof, Kakashi's signature state of being, the Jounin shrugged. Needed a break from the village. Came here to think. There was a standoff. The Umbu and Kakashi stood their ground, neither speaking or moving. Kakashi just had a rough conversation, he wasn't in the mood for Umbu and their secrets. Suddenly, the Umbu whipped his head around, pressing 2 fingers to the base of his neck. He was wearing a communicator. Looking back up at Kakashi, the Umbu sighed. I'm afraid you will have to leave. Find somewhere else to sit and think. Kakashi shrugged, making a show of standing up and brushing off his pants. Didn't realize these woods were closed off. Didn't hear of anything going on. He jumped down, standing in front of the Umbu. You do realize you're in the woods behind the prison, right? You can't honestly think we just let anyone sit around here. They motioned for Kakashi to exit. It's getting late. Your kids will be looking for you. With that, they flickered away. Not that Kakashi had been hiding keeping the 2 boys in his apartment, but how did some random Umbu know? And since when had the woods behind the prison been closed off? Nothing ever kept them out before. There used to be a training ground back there, Genma favoring that area to hone his Senbon spitting. Masking his chakra and presence as best he could, Kakashi quietly weaved between trees, trying to see what was being hidden. About 200 yards from the wall Kakashi stopped, peering around a thick tree. 2 Umbu, neither having the Konoha symbol on their masks, stood guard in front of the wall. The Umbu who had approached him flickered in front of them, nodding. They waved him through and Kakashi watched as they disappeared into the wall. A hidden doorway. From Kakashi's knowledge, and he was Umbu commander, there was no entrance to the tunnels on this side of the mountain. He didn't even think the tunnels ran this far. What exactly did he find? Inoichi sat at his desk, another code spread out in front of him. He entertained the idea of pulling his daughter in to help him, she was obviously better than he was. His stealth operatives found this scroll around the area they found the previous scroll. It had to be related, the encryption looked the same. Ino's notes were helping him, he'd already had 3 letters figured out, but it was going at such a slow pace. There was a knock on his door, a series of thumps only one person used. Come in, Kakashi. Shikaku had greenlit bringing Kakashi into their situation. Him coming to Inoichi made his job easier. The Jounin closed the door behind him, pulling a chair in front of the desk. I wasn't aware of anything that limits access to the woods behind the prison. He said it so nonchalantly, picking at his nails, ignoring the widening eyes of Inoichi. There's not. The blonde man pushed the scroll aside. An Umbu I didn't recognize, wearing a mask with no symbol, stopped me. Told me to leave. Kakashi looked up from his nails. They are guarding a secret door. Do I have to beg to be read in, Inoichi? The man laughed. Actually, I was coming to you. Shikaku and I need some help. I honestly can't believe you found out on your own. Inoichi reached into his vest, pulling out a small scroll. He passed it to Kakashi, who scanned it quickly. With a raised eyebrow, Kakashi looked back to the analyst. I'll take a stab in the dark, here. Danzo. The one and only. Inoichi rested his elbows on the desk. This could be it. The proof we need to take him down. What would you like me to do? Kakashi sat forward in his chair, handing the scroll back. I can't promise you an open schedule. I do have 2 boys, now. Inoichi laughed. And I have 2 girls, I completely understand. We need to get in there, get the information the scroll mentions. The sooner the better, honestly. Then, with a smirk, he added, and you always were amazing at stealth. Kakashi may have preened a little bit at the praise. Count me in. Shikamaru was covered in a sheen of sweat and a thin layer of dirt. Koji looked much the same. Sasuke was actually winded, leaning forward with his hands on his knees, grass stains, and dirt on his white shorts. Naruto had dirt in his hair, making it look brown with bright blonde highlights. Sakura and Ino, who showed up after their shift at the hospital, brought drinks with electrolytes. The boys stumbled over, chugging the drinks and tossing the empty bottles in a pile. It was a long day of training. Shikamaru got better, quickly. The kid was a genius, decent in taijutsu when he tried. In one brilliant move, Shikamaru staggered Sasuke, flipped backward, and landed in his pose, catching Sasuke in a shadow before the boy could catch his footing. It was the first time he'd ever seen Sasuke smile. Clever. Sasuke nodded. Shikamaru smirked. Glad you liked it. You guys done flirting? Naruto jogged up to them. Sasuke glared. I think you should teach them the chakra reserve thing. Causes Shika can't hold his shadows very long. It would help, right? Sasuke nodded. Yeah, it would help. He looked up at Shikamaru and Koji. Kakashi taught us this. It's been steadily growing our chakra reserves. You have to do it 2 hours a day, morning and night. After a week you'll start to notice the difference. As they sat on the ground, listening to Sasuke explain the positioning and how to feel it working, Naruto turned to Ino and Sakura. The girls had walked closer after gathering up the empty bottles. Do you think Team 8 could use some help, too? Yeah, why not? Sakura shrugged. I haven't seen them, honestly. But we can ask them. Team 8, made up of Kiba, Shino, and Hinata, was the last of what was referred to as the Rookie 9. Kiba, much like Naruto, threw himself into fights without a strategy. Hinata was afraid of her own shadow, too timid to be a ninja. And Shino, he was a mystery. Other than the bugs, no one knew a lot about him. He always sat in the back of the class and didn't really talk. If Teams 7 and 10 could work together, get stronger together, why can't they bring in another team? They could be the strongest graduating class in history. When the sun began to set, the kids decided to go home and rest. Shikamaru knew he would be sore the next day. He'd worked more in a few hours than he had his entire academy career. Koji chatted happily about the things he'd learned and how Sasuke praised him. The Uchiha was getting better at offering praise, especially since he knew it made Koji work harder. Ino and Sakura practically skipped home, holding hands, and smiling. Naruto looked at them, cocking his head, and then looked at Sasuke with a raised eyebrow. Sasuke just shrugged, assuming it was a girl thing. Kakashi had dinner ready when the boys walked through the door. They fought over the shower while trying to tell their sensei what they did that day. Sasuke used Naruto's loud, outgoing way of telling stories to sneak into the bathroom. Naruto was frowning when Sasuke emerged, damp hair and clean skin mocking the dirt still covering the blonde. Kakashi smirked, watching Naruto stomp to the bathroom, swearing at Sasuke. You do that on purpose, don't you? Kakashi asked, spooning rice in a bowl. Sasuke just smirked. Maybe. He took his own spoonful of rice before spearing a cherry tomato with his chopstick. As if teaching Team 10 isn't enough, Naruto wants to add Team 8. Kakashi nodded. Not a bad idea. I mean, Naruto managed to get Shikamaru to work hard, he might spur them on, too. He gently picked up some grilled salmon. Doesn't hurt to get stronger together. I mean, look how great Koji is doing under your teachings. Sasuke had to admit the boy was getting better. He wasn't as afraid to hurt people now. He had more confidence in himself. With one day of training, even Shikamaru was getting better, growing as a ninja. It shocked Sasuke most of all how good Sakura and Ino were doing. They both fought with a strength the Uchiha didn't know they had in them. I guess it might not be so bad. He shrugged. I showed them the chakra reserve meditation. Shikamaru's shadows don't last very long. Great idea. Shadow jutsu takes a lot of chakra and precision control. It probably wouldn't hurt for him to learn Naruto's chakra control training. Kakashi looked up as a clean and fresh Naruto emerged from the bathroom. He sat down at the kitchen island next to Sasuke, reaching for his own food. I'm really proud of you kids. Sasuke blushed and hid his face behind his wet bangs. Naruto smiled brightly. There was a lull of conversation while they ate, just the sound of Naruto kicking the legs of his chair while his feet dangled. Kakashi decided to bring up something he'd been running over in his head. What do you boys think about moving? They both locked their eyes on Kakashi. Naruto's eyes were wide. You want us to move out? No, I mean together. All of us. Get a bigger place where you boys will have your own rooms. Relief washed over Naruto's face. I told you, you will always have a place with me. I don't go back on my word. Sasuke shrugged, but his eyes kept glancing at Kakashi when he returned to his empty plate. Maybe somewhere outside of the village, more into the woods. Smiling, Naruto nodded. I'd like that. He looked over at his friend. Sasuke would, too. Said boy nodded, keeping his head down. He would like that, a lot. Living with Kakashi and Naruto was the most stable environment the boy had in a long time. It made him feel like he had a family, a new and slightly dysfunctional family. A routine, someone who listened and cared structure. Everything he missed about his life in the district, he had here. Things that were missing in his previous family he got here, too. Like praise and not being compared to his brother, not living in that large shadow. No, here he could be his own person. It wouldn't trade this, not now. Nothing would make Naruto leave now. Not if he had a choice to stay. Coming home to someone every day, having a best friend, having someone to look up to. It was everything he was missing. The fact that he could go to sleep and wake up with someone in the same place as him was the best thing. The comforting sounds of Sasuke breathing, of Kakashi's bed squeaking as he rolled around to get comfortable, the warmth of the blanket, thick and full of bedding. It wasn't his thin, ragged blanket from his old apartment. No, this was home. Nothing from the past mattered, as long as he had this to come home to. Well, I'll start looking around, then. Kakashi smiled. Any requests? Before Naruto could speak, Kakashi added, reasonable requests. Naruto laughed. Close to the woods would be nice. Sasuke offered. I have money from the dash. Kakashi reached over, squeezing Sasuke's shoulder. I'm not worried about the money, Sasuke. Let me do this for you, okay? He pursed his lips but did not. So, woods. Anything else? Oh. I always wanted a porch. I used to walk past this house when I was little. They had a big front porch with a swing. Can we have a porch? A mental picture of the kids sitting on a porch swing while Kakashi rocked in a chair, listening to them chattering as the sunset behind the trees flooded his mind. It was a great idea. Yeah, Naruto. A porch sounds nice. An idea formed in Kakashi's mind. He made a mental note to find Tenzo. His old friend and teammate owed him a favor. Time to call it in. Chapter 13, Crescendo. The sunlight filtered through the trees in flickering spots. The leaves danced in the slow breeze. All that could be heard was the crunching of dirt and pebbles under deep blue sandals. At the end of the path, where the dirt opened up to a large clearing, stood a traditional white house. Dark oak trim in curling, intricate designs. A vertical sign hanging by the weathered door read, Heitake Complex, in careful, red brush strokes. The neglected complex was covered in thick vines crawling up the sides and over the roof, in some places even slipping inside of window cracks. Thick weeds decorated the clearing, some with stalks thicker than a finger. Set on one side, closer to the border of the woods, sat a smaller building. Wide, open windows and large sliding doors gave entry and light. Tatami mats could be seen from the windows, green and mossy with time. It hurt, standing there in front of his childhood home, and seeing the memories covered in moss and vines. But Kakashi held firm, walking up to the front door and running his hand over the weathered wood. Paint flicked off under his fingertips, raining down on the ground like dark blue raindrops. The porch creaked under his weight, bowing in spots where the wood began to rot. Kakashi pushed at the door, hearing vines cracking and breaking as it swung open. The smell of must, moss, and mold assaulted his senses, the dust blowing out around his face. It was dark and cold inside as Kakashi stepped in. Something skittered across the floor, tiny feet scratching over the tatami mats. Spider webs clung to every corner, some coated in a thick layer of dust. Mold and moss shot up between the mats, growing over the corners and up the walls. It was spongy under his feet as Kakashi made his way through the living room and into the kitchen. The vines had broken through the windows and curled around the cabinet doors, pulling them ajar. Kakashi could see a bird nest in one of them, old and unused. Stepping back out, he turned toward the hallway. 3 bedrooms and a bathroom awaited him. One door was hanging off the bottom hinge, crooked and covered in green moss. The biggest bedroom, the last one on the right, loomed in front of him. It was his father's room. It was where his father had pushed a sword through his chest. It was where his father had died. Kakashi turned around and walked toward the front door. This house was too full of memories and ghosts. Even if it wasn't in horrible condition, even if it could be saved, it honestly wasn't worth it. No, this was not the place to bring his boys. The land, however, was still good. It just needed clearing, but that could be dealt with. As Kakashi stood in the weeds, staring at the dilapidated house that was once his childhood home, he heard the crunching sound of footsteps behind him. "Thank you for meeting me here," Kakashi spoke over his shoulder, a hand reached out and plucking a long weed from in front of him. "Have any trouble finding the place?" "Not at all. It's beautiful here." Tenzo stood beside Kakashi, watching the Jounin wrap the long piece of weed around his finger. "Didn't even know there was a house out this far." Kakashi nodded, finally turning away from the house and facing Tenzo. He flicked the weed off his finger, watching as it got caught in a tall, thick thorn bush. The old Hatake complex. Tenzo's eyes widened. I need to call in that favor." Tenzo, with his umbu mask hanging off his hip, nodded. "Of course, senpai. What do you need?" "Well, after I clean this place up, I was hoping you could build me a house. Here, in the woods. With a porch." Kakashi made sure he took in both of his boys' preferences. "And, maybe, rebuild the dojo." He felt eyes on him, not sure he wanted to see what look Tenzo was giving him. When he did chance it, it was to see a soft look on Tenzo's face, warm and open. The man just nodded, looking back toward the broken home. "We can do that, senpai." Tenzo took in the surroundings, the amount of work needed to bring the place to a livable condition. "Well, better hire some genin to clear it out, then." "Well, there was a whole group of genin he could grab, isn't there?" Kakashi smiled, patting Tenzo on the back. "I think I know where to find some, actually. It would be a lot of work. But surely 9 genin could do it in a couple of days. The boys would love it here. Sakura would love it here. She could stay whenever she wanted, he would make sure to tell her." "I'm crazy." Kakashi laughed. "I took on 2 boys. I'm insane. From what I've heard, senpai, those boys are better off with you." There was a memory in Tenzo's head. A memory of him being broken and alone, warped and twisted into something dark and sinister. Kakashi, so different than the hardened umbu he'd heard about, saved him, took him into the light. Tenzo could have done something terrible, something you can't go back from. Instead, Kakashi took him under his wing, showed Tenzo how to be a good man. They couldn't have found a better guardian. Something warm settled in Kakashi's chest. He was trying, so hard, to rear his kids the right way, the way they never experienced. In Tenzo's mind, Kakashi had already done that with him. The man had told him so a few times over too many bottles of sake. To hear someone important to him, someone whose opinion mattered, Tell Kakashi he was doing something good meant a lot. I'll let you know when it's all cleared, then. Thanks for your help. I have a mission to go on. It will take about a week. I'll start on it when I get back. Tenzo turned to him, giving Kakashi that soft look again. I mean it, senpai. Those kids are lucky. I always thought any genin you taught would turn out strong, talented. But living with you? Oh, those kids are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Tenzo laughed, turning back toward the property. I look forward to seeing your little terrors in action. It was Monday, and Kakashi could feel it. Something just seemed off. The feeling stayed with him all morning while he got the boys ready for the day and met up with Sakura in front of the mission room. A sense of déjà vu washed over him as the four walked in. Naruto was complaining about not having a C-rank mission. Sasuke rolled his eyes at him, but the look on his face showed he agreed. Sakura opened and closed her mouth several times, afraid to agree or disagree in front of the Hokage. Naruto, you're still a genin. Iruka began. Yes, you've done a lot of D-rank missions, but you aren't ready for a C-rank yet. How would you know? Naruto shot back. You'll never know if you're ready unless you try. Besides, how can you predict we are ready when all we do is weed gardens and bullshit like that? Sakura gasped and shushed him, making Naruto pout and cross his arms. The Hokage shook his head, looking at the boy as if he was a petulant child. It rubbed Kakashi the wrong way. Sasuke turned his head away with his arms crossed. He has a point. Hiruzen sighed, tapping his pipe on the desk. Actually, I was going to give you a C-rank, Naruto. We have a bridge builder named Tajuna. He would like to be escorted back to his village to finish a bridge. The old man motioned to the door where a ninja standing there pushed it open. A man, clearly intoxicated, stumbled in. Tajuna, these will be your escorts. The man scoffed, spittle flying from his mouth. A bunch of children? You can't be serious. With a sake bottle in his hand, Tajuna wildly motioned toward the team. Kman, I'm worth more than this. It hit Kakashi why this day felt so off. This was the day. He'd been so caught up in training his kids, keeping them safe, that he'd forgotten to count the days. This was the mission that nearly killed Sasuke, that Naruto first showed his power. He was frozen, not speaking, not moving, not blinking. The Hokage and Tajuna argued, he could vaguely hear it, as if it was happening outside. He could see Naruto's eyes draw down as the man talked about them not being good enough, strong enough. He saw Sasuke holding Naruto back. He could feel someone tugging at his sleeve. Sensei. Sakura's green eyes appeared in front of him, confused and worried. Are you okay? She said it quietly, as not to draw attention to him. He could still hear arguing around them. His body felt like it was made of lead, but he forced his arms to move, his body to react. Kakashi reached out and gripped her shoulder, giving her, what he hoped, was a friendly smile. I'm okay. Just lost in thought, I guess. He looked over at Naruto and Sasuke who were frowning at the man. Are we taking this mission, then? Both boys whipped around, eyes wide. Naruto jumped at him, pulling on his arm. Of course we are, right? We can do this. Right, Sensei? Tell them, Sensei. He was loud, practically yelling in the small room. He felt unheard, unseen, unacknowledged. The Jounin leaned down to his eye level, gripping the small shoulders. It was his way to show Naruto he was heard, seen, acknowledged. Of course you three can do it. You're well trained, capable. By the sounds of it, this mission will take quite a while. Pack for a long trip. He stood up, shooing the kids out the door. Naruto was smiling, practically skipping, pulling Sasuke by the wrist. Sakura following, chiding Naruto but looking just as excited. With the kids out of earshot, Kakashi turned to the Hokage. We leave in the morning. Nodding, Hiruzen tapped his pipe on the table again. Are they ready? Honestly. Kakashi let out a humorless laugh. Of course they are. I've trained them. If it sounded like boasting, he didn't care. He knew what his kids could do, what they could accomplish. They were miles ahead of the other genin, although some of them were quickly catching up. Nothing could slow him down, slow his kids down, not now. He turned to Tajuna, giving the man a quick nod. We will meet you at the gate at dawn. Don't make my kids wait. As he walked out the door, he could feel the eyes on him. Kakashi didn't care. This was the mission that defined his team, and he was scared. The door slid shut behind him and Kakashi took to the streets. His kids were waiting for him, standing there chatting. They were excited, nervous energy filling their space. It was Sasuke who noticed him first. Why are you acting like you don't want this mission? Kakashi held back a laugh. His blunt, brash Sasuke. It's not that you kids aren't ready. But, maybe, I'm not ready to let you go into something that could be dangerous. It wasn't a total lie. He knew how it ended, at least in the previous timeline. Kakashi wasn't looking forward to seeing Sasuke lay bleeding and looking near death. Naruto looked near tears. He dug his fingers into Sasuke's arm coverings, the fabric twisting tight. He glanced at the blonde before bumping shoulders with him. He'll be there with us, moron. Naruto gave the arm covering a tug. He gave Sasuke a small smile. It's just, Naruto looked at the ground. He cares. Sakura's green eyes widened before she flung herself at Naruto, wrapping her arms around his neck. Sensei isn't the only one who cares, Naruto. The tears that were threatening to fall lost their battle. Still gripping Sasuke's arm covering, and smothered in Sakura's embrace, Naruto did start to cry. Kakashi gave up trying to be the strong one. Instead, he grabbed Sasuke's shirt and pulled him into the hug as well. They were a pile of arms and heads and Kakashi loved every second of it. With a freshly decoded scroll in hand, Inoichi burst into Shikaku's office. A couple jounin were in there, but they hurriedly left when they took in the blonde man's appearance. Shikaku didn't even ask, just activated his privacy seals. Inoichi waited until the myriad of lights glowed on the walls before laying the scroll out. Read this. Tell me what you think it means. He kept tapping the scroll, annoying Shikaku as he tried to read it. Shikaku batted his hand away. Stop it. Instead of seeing Ino's flowery handwriting, it was Inoichi's scratchy, rigid pen strokes. Target, Samui Miyuki. Accidental. 6 to 7 alone in office. It's an assassination contract. Their eyes met as Inoichi practically vibrated. The man loved a mystery, loved hidden information. This was his candy store. Samui Miyuki is a politician. He's a very close friend of Lord Hokage's. Inoichi nodded. We believe this is Danzo, right? Shikaku hummed in agreement. Has this politician done anything to wrong Danzo? Shikaku just shrugged. Not that I've heard. It's definitely something to look into. We also need to warn him. Who knows when this is happening? The commander rolled up the scroll and handed it back to Inoichi. I'll get a jounin team together. You get the Hokage's permission. Sure thing. Inoichi gave Shikaku a mock salute before leaving the room. Bracing his hands on his desk, Shikaku hung his head. Whatever mess Inoichi got him into was troublesome. He had enough trouble controlling headstrong jounin, let alone stopping corrupt people in power. With a long sigh, Shikaku summoned the Chiryunin standing outside his door. He needed to talk to one of the only people he could trust outside of his previous team. Looking the Chiryunin straight in the eye, Shikaku's voice was calm but firm. Find Kakashi. Hiruzen was hunched over his desk, pen moving quickly in his hand as he scribbled a note. Inoichi knocked on the door, entering when he heard the call. The office was filled with tobacco smoke, it was permeated into the walls and floor, hit you in the face as soon as the door opened. Inoichi hated the smell, made his throat feel tight, made his mouth run dry. But ninja persist. Lord Hokage, I have some troubling news. He watched as Hiruzen's eyes drew down, but pushed forward, handing the old man the damning scroll. We have received a classified scroll. Hiruzen's eyes roamed over the page. Do we know who wrote it? No, Inoichi wasn't exactly lying. He didn't have definitive proof it was Danzo who wrote it, or was behind it in any way. It was a hunch that he, Shikaku, and now Kakashi, believed. We also don't know when it will take place. I'm sure Shikaku could have a team ready before evening. Nodding, Hiruzen laid the scroll down on his desk. He pulled out a slip of paper and scribbled a quick note. Send this to Muka by Hawk. It should get there before the Jounin do. Hopefully one or the other gets there in time. The old man sighed. Tell the Jounin to prioritize capture over kill. I'd like to know who is after my dear friend. Yes, sir. Inoichi knew that, once the scroll was in Hiruzen's hands, he would never see it again. The man didn't have to know the scroll he was currently hiding in his desk was a copy. The original was safely hidden away in Inoichi's office. As the analyst left the tower, heading back to Shikaku's office, one of his underlings jumped in front of him, out of breath. Sir, a new scroll. Inoichi looked from the scroll to his underling. Found in the same place. The man nodded. This is the third one. This is a pattern. Someone is leaving them there. He looked up at the mountain. I'll take care of this. Go back to the office. The man nodded again. It didn't take the Chunin long to find Kakashi. He was barely away from the mission room when the young man yelled his name. So, when Shikaku found himself looking at Kakashi standing in his doorway, he was a little surprised it was so soon after Inoichi left. Yo! The gray-haired man leaned against the doorway in his signature aloof pose. You called for me? Shikaku motioned toward the privacy seals still lit around the room. Come in and shut the door, please. He looked down at his desk, listening for the click of the door shutting. Inoichi decoded another scroll. This one was for an assassination of a politician. Kakashi was now sitting with one hip on his desk. Both scrolls so far have been found in the same area. Two could be a coincidence. Kakashi looked sideways at Shikaku. But we don't believe in coincidence, do we? Shikaku smirked. We need your stealth skills. Kakashi held up a hand. My kids have a C rank starting tomorrow morning. If you want my stealth skills, it will have to be tonight or when we come back. Piercing eyes watched Kakashi, making the Jounin squirm. Your kids, huh? Shikamaru said things have changed. The boys living with you, the girl with Inoichi, becoming genin sure shook up their worlds. He shrugged. Shook yours up, too. Yeah. Kakashi breathed out. It was true, a lot of things got shook up. In a good way, I hope. One thing I have to ask, though, it can't be easy having two preteens living in a small apartment. Where are they sleeping? On futons on the floor. He felt almost guilty admitting it, but there wasn't another choice. The boys didn't complain, but it wasn't ideal. I have another idea, though. Shikaku nodded. Your old homestead? Probably needs a lot of work. Kakashi laughed. More like needs entirely tore down and rebuilt. I'm going to work on it. Tenzo agreed to build a new house for us. He marveled at how easy it was for the term us to flow from his mouth. Like it was always there, that's the way it always was. Maybe that was true, they were always in us and he just didn't see it. There was a glint in Shikaku's eyes when he glanced back up at his friend. What? Nothing. Shikaku shrugged, faking nonchalance. Those kids are good for you, that's all. Their conversation was cut off when Inoichi came barging in the door, scroll clutched tightly in his hand. We have another one. He practically thrust it at Shikaku. Same place. We have a secret informant. Hidden information always made Inoichi overly excited. It's encoded differently than the other ones. The code looks more difficult. Unrolling it, Shikaku's eyes narrowed. His brain running in overdrive trying to piece it together. Definitely not like the other one. Can you solve it? Quickly. Actually, Inoichi shrugged his shoulders. I was thinking of giving it to Ino. I mean, she's faster than me. The other two men in the room gaped at him. I'm serious. After a long pause, Kakashi began laughing. You actually are serious. Shikaku just shook his head, it was killing him that solving this quickly caused them to rely on a genin. Fine. Shikaku waved him off. Just, bring her here so I know it's private. Putting his hands in his pockets, the commander threw his head back. I can't believe I just said that. The long hallway that leads to Shikaku's office is only lit by yellow lights hanging on the walls. It made the walls seem dull and dingy, made the hallway seem smaller. The Chiryunin she was following kept glancing back as if confused as to why a genin was called in. The entire situation had interrupted training, ruining Ino's perfect record in beating Shikamaru at shuriken throwing. She was a little miffed. The door to Shikaku's office was a deep brown oak, nearly black in the dull lighting. The Chiryunin knocked 3 sharp hits of his knuckles, before opening the door and waving Ino in. She entered the room to see 3 men awaiting her. We having a party?" Ino asked, flipping her hair. She recognized that look on her father's face. He was excited about something. "Dad, what's going on? What you're about to do does not leave this room." Shikaku always sounded bored when he talked. Even when he was being serious, his aloof persona just naturally made him sound as if he didn't care. But, if you looked at his eyes, they betrayed how serious he actually was. Ino had been around him long enough to know what to look for. She swallowed hard and nodded. "We've received another scroll, similar to the one you already decoded. This one, however, is more difficult." Tanned Hands handed a scroll to her. She looked up at her father, apprehension on her face. "Go ahead, honey. Let me know what you think." It was just a plain paper scroll, nothing fancy on the outside, nothing fancy about the wrappings. She unfurled it, stretching the paper out between her hands. The handwriting was different. Jagged, sharp lines written with a quill. They had put too much ink in the tip, drops of black peppering the paper and bleeding around the letters. Although the same type of code, it wasn't the same as before. This one didn't have a defined pattern, a defined set of words. It was jumbled up as if it was all one long word that spanned the length of the page. Her eyes tried to pick out a pattern, any type of sequence she could latch onto. "Can you do it?" Kakashi pulled her mind from the scroll. She just gave him a flat look. "Yeah, stupid question." Ino huffed out a laugh. "Get to work, kid." Shikaku motioned toward his vacant chair, in which Ino took no time to sit herself down as if she owned the place. He handed her a blank sheet of paper and a pen and let the girl get to work. As they sat there, waiting for Ino, Kakashi took a look around the room. The privacy seals on the walls drew his attention. They weren't like the ones Naruto had painstakingly drawn on his own walls. These looked simpler, not as well thought out. Naruto's were busy, covered in runes and symbols that all glowed a different color. They had settings in there for sound privacy, no intrusive jutsu, and, if wanted, can block chakra signatures from inside the room. Kakashi wondered if Shikaku would like an upgrade and ask Naruto to put similar ones on the commander's walls. When his eyes wandered back around the room, they met Inoichi's. "Something on your mind, Hey-take?" Shikaku smirked. "He's becoming Mr. Mom." Kakashi flipped him off. Talked Tenzo into building him a house. If Ino was paying attention, she didn't make a move, just continued working. "Oh, where?" The blonde man looked like he just got another piece of classified information. It was the same amount of joy and excitement. Then, as if he put a puzzle together, his blonde eyebrows rose. "The Hey-take complex." Kakashi nodded. "Yeah. It needs a lot of work. But once we get back from this mission, I'll get the kids started on it." Whether they thought Ino was paying attention or not, she was. Her mind whirled, being split between the ambient chatter and this monster of a code in front of her. But somewhere in the back of her mind, she compartmentalized that tidbit. She felt her father lean over her shoulder, reading the paper. She already had the first letter figured out. Now that she had a formula, the rest would go quickly. Shikamaru peeked around the corner of his house with his hands in his pockets, trying to find where his mother was. Training was cut short today. Ino's father had sent a Chiryunin to get her. That, in itself, wasn't normal. The fact that the Chiryunin was taking Ino to his father's office was the icing on the cake. Something big was happening. Something them, as genin, weren't supposed to know about. Damn Ino and her ability to make Shikamaru care about something troublesome. Koji followed closely behind him, fidgeting in anxiousness. He was never good at stealth. Koji was too jumpy, too timid. But Shikamaru figured a great way to break him and was to start with a building Koji knew the way in and out of. Deciding the house was a little too quiet, Shikamaru yelled out for his mother. He got no response. Maybe his mother actually was out. He couldn't sense her weak chakra signature anywhere. Deeming it safe, Shikamaru led Koji further into the house and toward the room in the back, where his father's private office was. He had strict instructions to never go in there. And, before today, Shikamaru never had a want to enter there. But now, something was going on and Shikamaru wanted to know what. It was just a spare bedroom his father had repurposed. The door was reinforced, locked, and sealed. Not locked and sealed enough to keep Shikamaru out, however. He knew his father, knew his habits. It only took a few minutes to break in. Koji tiptoed behind him, his head on a swivel to take everything in. Shikamaru, however, went straight for the desk. He took a detour to the tall cabinet, stretching his arm up to the top and hooking his fingers around a small key. It fits in a small, hidden lock under the desk. Inside the small door, the key unlocks were a storage scroll hiding the most important information Shikaku keeps at home. Rolling the scroll out on the table in the corner, with Koji at his elbow, Shikamaru summoned the contents inside. Folders and scrolls came flooding from the seal, tumbling on the table. He sorted through them, trying to find something that could disrupt the village. Nothing really stuck out to him, until he discovered a folder with the word Danzo written on the cover. This was the name Ino had mentioned. Who is that? Koji's voice was quiet. Shikamaru glanced at him before opening the folder. Someone Dad and Inoichi have been looking into. Ino mentioned him during a mission. With training, I haven't had time to look into it. But, something about how Ino got taken away today, something just doesn't feel right. The man's picture was paper clipped to the inside of the folder. A scarred man with bandages covering half his face, Danzo looked angry. There were papers covered in tightly written text, chronicling the rumors and hints of activity the man was involved in. The list was long, his reach deep. From politicians to the Umbu, Danzo seemed to have a hand in everything. No wonder they are so worried. This is a huge knot to untangle. I hate politics, Koji grumbled, nervously tapping the table. Makes me nervous. Shikamaru huffed out a laugh. Me too. The pages were telling a story. It was a disgusting story of unsanctioned missions and secret meetings and assassinations. Koji, do you know what a mimic folder looks like? The boy shook his head. Yeah, didn't think so. Instead, Shikamaru walked over to the tall cabinet himself and pulled one out of the box. This folder needs to go to Ino, but he knows it can't be the original. Koji watched as he hurriedly copied the folder and put everything back where he'd found it. Shikamaru took another look around the room, making double sure everything was in its original place. Seemingly satisfied, Shikamaru gently nudged Koji out the door. Done. Koji eyed the folder in his friend's hand. Done. When I get older, I'm gonna grow a beard. Naruto was throwing his clothes in a backpack, guaranteed to be wrinkled when they reached their destination. His mouth had been running the entire time he leaned over his pack, on his knees. Sasuke was sitting on the couch, gently folding his clothes and put them into his pack. He'd blocked out most of what the blonde had been saying, but that wiggled into his brain. What? Why? Giving Naruto a look, Sasuke just couldn't picture him with a beard. No. Naruto startled, turning to look at him. What do you mean, no? It's my face. He slapped his hands to his face, rubbing the smooth skin there. I mean, I can't grow one now, but I will. Yeah no, when my, face hair grows. There was a dumbstruck look on Sasuke's face. You need to hit puberty first, moron. Even then you would look ridiculous with a beard. Just wouldn't suit your face. He turned his attention back to the backpack. Idiot. Dick. Naruto shot back. I'd look sexy with a beard. Just wait, I'll show you. He looked so smug that Sasuke nearly began laughing at him. Instead, he just rolled his eyes. I'll be so sexy even you will want me. Loser. Sasuke threw a scroll at Naruto, hitting him between the eyes. There was a knock on the door. Sasuke used answering it as an excuse to hip bump Naruto's shoulder on the way through. Standing on the other side was Sakura, her backpack slung over her shoulder. Hey. She gave a small wave. No one's home at Ino's. Can I come in? Sasuke rolled her eyes and waved her in. Naruto jumped up, smiling. Of course you can, Sakura. He walked over and grabbed her shoulders. Sakura, I need to ask you a serious question. Please be entirely honest. Sakura cocked her head, curious. She nodded. Okay. Would I look sexy with a beard? Sasuke scoffed. Shut up, Dick, I'm talking to Sakura. Sakura began laughing, practically doubling over. She had barely caught her breath before trying to answer. No, absolutely not. Miffed, Naruto crossed his arms, sat on the couch, and pouted. Sakura settled down, wiping the tears from her eyes. Why don't you just transform yourself so you know? Naruto jumped up, eyes wide. Why didn't I think of that? He ran to the bathroom. Sasuke just shook his head and finished packing his backpack, feeling the pulse of Naruto's chakra from the bathroom. By the time he was finished, and Sakura had taken up a place on the couch, Naruto came bursting out of the room. I got it. Both of his teammates looked up. There Naruto stood with a dark brown beard that hung clear down to his chest, ending in a sharp point. Above his mouth was a mustache, one that curled at the ends in a finger-thick circle. He looked so proud of himself, his blue eyes shimmering with excitement. Making hand motions, trying to pull a reaction from the other two, Naruto was getting impatient. Well. Again, Sakura began laughing so hard she curled into a ball, barely able to take a breath. Sasuke just stared at him, head cocked to the side. Nope. Sasuke shook his head. Doesn't do anything for me, moron. He suddenly got an armful of bearded Naruto, pouncing on top of him, getting him in a chokehold. Sakura was still laughing, not able to help as Sasuke begins fighting the bearded blonde off of him. Kakashi walked into his apartment to Naruto wrapped in ninja wire, hanging from the ceiling. Sakura sat on the kitchen island snacking on celery sticks while Sasuke tried to throw baby carrots into Naruto's open mouth. What is going on? Kakashi treads lightly into the room. He was honestly confused. Naruto, why do you have a beard? To prove that I'll be sexy when I'm older and I grow one. Naruto wriggled in the wire, his arms to his sides. What do you think, sensei? Kakashi looked from the hanging pendulum that was Naruto to the other kids in the kitchen. They just shrugged at him, looking entirely too innocent. Well, Naruto, I hate to break it to you, but if you do grow a beard, it won't be dark brown. It will be blonde like your hair, most likely. The Jounin walked over and began unwrapping the kid. Some people just aren't meant to have a beard. Some people just don't look right with one. I think you fall under that category. As he worked on the wire, silently cursing Sasuke and his skill with knots, he glanced over to Sakura. You staying the night, Sakura? Oh, can I? She picked at the skin around her nails, nervous. I can go back. I left a note for them, but if you don't dash. Stay, Sakura. Kakashi finally got Naruto unhooked. I'm sure one of the boys will let you use a futon. He tugged on Naruto's beard. Change back, kiddo. Save your chakra for tomorrow. Naruto sighed but released the transformation. Now, who's hungry? As Kakashi busied himself in the kitchen, the boys argued over who was giving up their futon. The events of the day ran through his head. The timeline was so different than the last one. He didn't know that Shikaku and Inoichi already had Danzo on their radar before. Nor did he know Inoichi had trained a master analyst in his daughter. Shikaku had let the girl take the scroll home since she hadn't finished it, but she had 4 letters figured out. Kakashi was impressed. They had told him about the assassination scroll, and that Sandaime knows. The man who is the target is one Kakashi remembers vaguely hearing about. He lives in a small, outlying village known for being a tourist trap. It was rumored, before, that he was killed by loan sharks. Now he knows the truth. He also knows that Shikaku sent a team of highly trained Jounin to save the guy. Sadly, Kakashi knows the men will arrive too late. This time, however, Kakashi will know how Sandaime handled it. Or, more likely, how he didn't handle it. Once dinner was served and devoured, Kakashi sent the kids for a shower one by one. By the time Kakashi got his own shower and gently walked back out in the living room, the kids had figured out the sleeping arrangements. They'd pushed the two futons close together, nearly forming one large mattress. Sakura lay in between the boys as she showed them something in Lady Tsunade's book. The boys listened closely as she explained about chakra coils and how she was learning to see them. He went to bed with the three of them chatting in the living room, his three kids together and under his roof. Things just felt right, peaceful. Like this was what Kakashi had always been missing. A family. Chapter 14, They would be fine. Well. You're back. The water sloshed around Naruto's ankles as he turned around. The piercing yellow eyes shone through the darkness. The glint of a claw flickered, peeking through the thick bars. It was cold. Naruto stood there, light shirt and shorts and no shoes in the murky, cold water. He could feel the goosebumps cascading across his skin, making him shiver. A huff of warm air as the monster breathed ruffled his hair. Not on purpose. Naruto glanced around at the dull yellow light reflecting off the gray cement walls. This place sucks. I definitely don't want to be here. Stupid child. It was your father who made this prison. It was he who put me in this hellhole. And you have the nerve to comment on it? The glinting claw slowly emerged from the darkness, heading straight towards the boy. Naruto tried to jump out of the way, but the monster was faster. The claw stopped a hair width from his forehead. Naruto's eyes went wide. He took a step back and the claw followed him. What are you doing? He tried for bravado, but his voice shook. The Kyuubi laughed, deep and raspy. You can't kill me in here, can you? Sadly, no. Technically, we are in your subconscious. To prove his point, the Kyuubi pushed the claw forward. It phased straight through Naruto's forehead, feeling like an icicle being pushed against his skin. It is tempting. But, no, I need you to live. If you die, I will cease to exist for 100 years. I've heard it's uncomfortable, floating in darkness, aware but unable to move. Rubbing at his forehead, Naruto tried to get the cold feeling from the claw to go away. He scrunched up his nose. That does sound terrible. And lonely. I'm stuck here. I know lonely. The yellow eyes narrowed. A black nose, shining in the yellow light, pressed against the bars. You, however, can keep me company. Let me out. Let me show you true power. White, glinting teeth shined as the Kyuubi gave him a sinister smile. Let's show this village what happens when you mistreat someone. Blonde hair whipped around as Naruto shook his head. No. I don't want to hurt people. Instead of getting angry, like Naruto was anticipating, the Kyuubi's sinister smile grew. You think you don't hurt people now? You hurt them by existing. You are a constant reminder of me and the destruction I was forced to cause. Why do you think they hate you, kid? You cause this entire village pain. Naruto shut his eyes tight as the Kyuubi talked, as he mocked him. He shook his head hard, refusing to believe this monster inside him. There were people who hated him, there would always be people like that, but not everyone. He had friends, now. He had Kakashi and Sasuke and Sakura and Iruka and Team 10. It was a long list, longer than he'd ever had. They didn't make fun of him just to hurt him. They didn't look at him that way. Now, they laughed with him, joked with him, wanted to be around him. The Kyuubi was laughing, deep and raspy, his eyes narrowed to slits in mirth. The monster was wrong. People cared now. When he opens his eyes, there will be people beside him. But what if they weren't? What if it's all a dream? What if none of the past month was real? He could see his friends, they were standing in front of him, waving him closer. Naruto ran toward them, but they stayed just out of reach. He stretched out his arm, reaching as far as his fingertips would take go, but to no avail. His friends were laughing at him, pointing at him, giving him that look. He called out to them, still reaching, but they continued to laugh and point. It was all a joke to them. They weren't real. The Kyuubi was right. He yelled out, sitting straight up in bed. The room was still dark, the sun barely peeking out from behind the mountain. Warm, calloused hands gripped his shoulders, a deep voice floating through the fog of his brain. It kept saying his name, over and over. Soon, a female voice joined in as another set of hands began touching his face and hands. He could hear thumping, almost sounding like footsteps, coming closer to him. The world slowly came back into focus. Naruto didn't know what exactly was going on, but the hands on him were warm and the voices were soft, they sounded worried. His eyes were open, but he was seeing everything in dull colors, black around the edges. Black hair kept swinging in front of him, blocking his view of the window. The day was starting to break, the orange of the sunrise slowly seeping into the room. There was a hand in his hair, slowly scratching his scalp with blunt nails. It felt amazing. Naruto concentrated on the feeling, his eyes closing as he just felt. He could hear words, fragmented sentences, floating through the haze inside his mind. The blunt scratching kept him grounded, kept him from falling back into the wet dungeon with the monster locked inside of him. The Kyuubi's laughter was getting farther away, his power to keep Naruto trapped in his head getting weaker and weaker. It was slow, felt like it took hours, but the room came into focus, the colors became bold, the voices began making full sentences and stopped sounding like they were in a different room. Sasuke's dark eyes came into focus, wide and worried. Equally as wide and worried was Sakura's pale green, with a hint of tears at the corners. Someone was sitting behind him, Naruto's back to his chest, his hands in the blonde hair. Naruto. Breathe. Kakashi's voice rumbled through his chest and into Naruto's back. In and out, okay? In and out. Sakura's hair was sticking up on one side, messy from sleeping in one position the entire night. Naruto's mind focused on that, breathing in and out deeply because it blew a couple of strands backward when he exhaled. It was mesmerizing, kept him interested as he came back to the here and now. Finally, it felt like his brain kicked back on. He blinked, his eyes feeling dry and his mouth feeling like cotton. He tried to speak, but his voice came out in a broken croak. The pink hair disappeared from his view, replaced by dark eyes staring into him. He heard a thump of someone hitting the floor before a cold glass of water was thrust into his hand. Naruto took a huge mouthful, letting the water wash away the cotton in his mouth and throat. Thanks. His voice was still husky, but a lot better than before. Kakashi stopped scratching, pushing himself backward and scooting to the side, looking at Naruto's face. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Naruto. Kakashi looked scared. You can't help it. It's a panic attack. He wasn't scared of Naruto, he was scared for Naruto. Do you know what brought it on? Naruto nodded but gave a worried look towards Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto had never told Sakura about the Kyuubi. He wasn't ready, was afraid to lose her and this newfound friendship he'd formed. It was like Kakashi could read his mind, giving the boy a solemn nod. Instead of pushing the subject, Kakashi stood up and reached for his wallet. He handed it to Sakura and ordered her and Sasuke to go get them some breakfast. The sun was barely up, few places would be open, but he needed them out of the house. It took a few false starts, but the two eventually left, albeit begrudgingly. Once alone in the apartment, Naruto began biting his lip, worrying the skin between his teeth. Kakashi let him sit, let him work up the courage and words to say. Remember I told you I can talk to him. Kakashi nodded. Well, I went in there when I was sleeping. He kept talking to me, telling me things, telling me my friends aren't real. He wants me to let him out. I won't. I promise, sensei, I won't. Naruto, calm down. I know you won't. He cut Kakashi off, sitting up on his knees and forcing Kakashi to look at him. Everyone hates me because of him, I know that. I know when people look at me, they see the destruction and just remember, but I'm not him. I promise, sensei, I'm not him. But he was right, people do hate me and they always will. And I hurt people every day by just existing. I know I have friends, now. But if they know they will hate me, too. Then I'll be alone again. Tears were streaming down the boy's face as he rambled. Kakashi pulled him into a hug, holding him tight while he cried. Let me tell you something, okay? Kakashi felt Naruto nod against his chest. These friends you've made are real. Sasuke and Sakura care about you. Will Sakura be surprised when you tell her? Of course. Sasuke already knows, right? He didn't run away. He doesn't hate you. Neither will Sakura. Shikamaru, Koji, and Ino will not hate you. I can promise you that. You don't have to tell them now. We have a mission right now, so you can think about it, decide how you want to tell them. Naruto pulled back and looked up at him, fear in his eyes. I know you don't want to tell them. But, Naruto, you can't hide these attacks. They will want to know why. I really think you should tell them. Kakashi was standing in the kitchen when Sakura and Sasuke returned, bags of food in hand. They looked around the room, looking for Naruto. He was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of tea between his hands and looking haggard. Sakura quietly sat the bags down on the counter, stepping around the blonde as if stepping around a caged animal. Naruto didn't look up. He didn't want to see pity on his friends' faces. Instead, he kept his head down, eyes focused on the cup of tea in front of him and the steam rising off the surface, curling in the air. I'm sorry, Naruto sniffed. I woke you guys up early. And it's mission day. Sakura leaned her head in front of him. Don't be sorry. It's a panic attack, right? You can't help when those happen. There was a section in Tsunade's book that dealt with mental illnesses. Sakura had read it 3 times, certain parts reminding her of the ninja she'd met in the hospital. Post-traumatic stress disorder and panic attacks were popular among ninja, especially those who survived the last war. They deserved a ward all their own, a doctor equipped to help them solely with mental health, but Konoha didn't have something like that. From looking at Naruto, she knew it was badly needed. Really, Naruto, it's okay. We're not mad. She paused to bite her lip. You were talking. Kept saying Sasuke and I aren't real, that we are gonna run away. What did you mean? Sasuke expected Naruto to look scared. He expected him to flail himself off the stool. He did not expect Naruto to sigh in resignation and continue to stare at his tea as if waiting for his execution. He glanced up at Kakashi, who just gave him a small smile. I'm the Kyuubi hierarchy. It was out. All of his team now knew his secret. Naruto kept his head down, waiting for something to happen. There was a long pause. No one so much as breathed while they waited. Sakura's eyes were wide in shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She didn't know what to say, how to feel. A million thoughts were whirling through her mind. The hate he got, the way the parents kept their kids away, so much made sense. She did the math in her head, came to the same realization as Sasuke did. He was an infant. He was innocent. Naruto didn't know what he expected to happen, but getting an armful of Sakura wasn't it. He nearly got knocked off his stool with how hard she collided with him. Oh, Naruto. She hugged him tightly, just shy of painful. I'm not going anywhere. You're my teammate, my friend. Friends stay together no matter what. She pulled back, looking him in the eye. I am not going anywhere. She enunciated each word, making sure the boy heard her clearly. The relief she saw on his face made her heart ache. He honestly believed she would run if she knew. Sakura looked up at Sasuke, waiting for him to say something. He didn't. He just stood there with his arms crossed. Get over here, Sasuke. Team 7 puppy pile. Kakashi laughed as Sakura grabbed him by the shirt, dragging Sasuke on Naruto's other side. It was awkward, all limbs not knowing where to go and heads in strange positions, but Naruto was beaming. That, alone, made it all worth it. The stroll to the village gate was leisurely. Sakura made small talk, almost making up for Naruto's lack of interaction. The civilians were leaving their houses, on the way to work, dodging around the group as they went in the opposite direction. The cobblestone path was already warm even though the sun had only been up for a couple of hours. It was early summer in Konoha, the air dry as it blew around them. As they passed the guardhouse, Izumo and Kotetsu were already inside and looking bored. They gave Kakashi a nod as he walked past, but didn't make any other movement. Being gate guards had to be a boring job, but Kakashi was never shackled with that. He moved through the ranks too fast, was too indispensable, to work somewhere that inane. Mission for the ducklings, hey take. Izumo called out, smirking at his own joke. Kotetsu just rolled his eyes. Before Kakashi could answer, Naruto cut in. Ducklings. Comically, he glanced between his sensei and the gate guards. We can't be anything cooler than ducklings. He honestly looked offended, it just made Izumo and Kotetsu laugh. Naruto pouted. What would you rather be? Kotetsu leaned over the counter, getting a better look at the other two genins. Cubs? Pups? Piglets? Piglets. Naruto's voice screeched. That's worse. They were interrupted by Tajuna marching up the road, a pointed hat on his head and a white towel around his neck. He looked, surprisingly, sober. With how drunk the man was yesterday, it was a sudden change. Hello. He called out, too loud for how close he was to them. Let's get this show on the road, shall we? The old man's voice sounded more chipper than he was. Kakashi knew the story, he knew the man was braver than he looked, going against a shipping mogul who was known to dabble in dark habits. The fact that this man, an old drunkard, inspired a village to come together and build a bridge that would put a target on their backs, had surprised Kakashi back then. This time around, seeing how the man was before leaving the village, he was still surprised. As the kids exited the gates for the first time in their lives, you could feel the excitement in the air. Naruto was bouncing around, taking in all the sights and sounds. Although looking aloof, Sasuke's eyes never stayed still, cataloging the area. Sakura clasped her hands behind her back, looking around. The stance was so much like Ino, Kakashi couldn't help but make the comparison. Naruto was slowly coming back to himself, the new area taking his mind off of his terrible morning. He knew Sakura had questions, but she kept them to herself. Kakashi was grateful for that. She didn't bombard him with things the boy wasn't ready to answer, or just didn't know the answer to. There was still a lot about the Kyuubi he didn't know. It was worrying Kakashi how the connection between Naruto and the Kyuubi had been altered. Kakashi wasn't sure if the time jump may have weakened the seal, but he didn't like it. He didn't like the way he talked to the boy or the way it brought on panic attacks. He could only remember Naruto having won in the previous timeline after he learned the Kages were planning on disposing of Sasuke. 2 of them in a month was concerning. Kakashi hoped it wasn't going to be a pattern, or that the Kyuubi would stop messing with Naruto's subconscious. Kakashi wondered what Jiraiya would think or if he would notice anything off about the seal. They had time before Jiraiya arrived, at least a couple of months unless the time jump threw something else off. He was so lost in thought that Kakashi didn't realize they were entering the forest proper until Sakura pointed it out. The trees were thicker here, the branches growing over the path and creating a canopy of leaves gently blowing in the breeze. Animals out here were curious. Squirrels and chipmunks would run from branch to branch just to look at the humans, watch them walk by. Sunlight came down in spots, dancing on the ground as the breeze moved the leaves. Gripping his backpack straps tightly, Naruto walked with his head on a swivel. He was torn between being in a slump over his morning panic attack and being excited to be out of the village. The walls always looked oppressive, always looming in the distance no matter how far he walked. He spent a lot of his childhood just walking, mapping out the village. There were places he couldn't go, places the Umbu kept tightly protected. Naruto was good at hiding, good at sneaking around, but there were some places even he couldn't get into. He looked to his right, where Sasuke was walking, hands in his pockets. When they were younger, Sasuke was always someone above him, someone Naruto couldn't touch. Now, he knows what Sasuke looks like when he's sleeping, soft and warm. He knows what Sasuke's hair looks like first thing in the morning, what he looks like in clothes too big and too long for him. Dark eyes glanced at him, an eyebrow raising. He playfully bumped Sasuke's shoulder, earning a scoff for his effort. Moron. He tried to sound annoyed, but a smirk played at Sasuke's lips. Sasuke had to admit he was getting comfortable in the cocoon his team had made. When he was 7, he vowed to never care about anything other than killing Itachi ever again. Now, at 12, he realized how innocent he was, how small and set and in pain. Vowing never to care wasn't realistic. Sasuke tried that. He tried to close off, to feel like nothing mattered but power and vengeance. Instead, all he got was being alone. Now, with this team and their dynamic, he was never alone. Naruto was always there beside him, no matter what they were doing. Sakura was a solid presence during training and missions, always keeping him grounded and centered. And Kakashi had helped him immensely. Kakashi gave Sasuke what no one else ever would. He gave him answers. It hasn't rained for a week. Sakura's voice was soft as she talked, as if not to spook anyone. She drew everyone's attention to a small puddle of water on the side of the path. There shouldn't be water there. The boys followed her gaze to the puddle. Kakashi was proud of his kids. They hadn't noticed the puddle last time. He'd taught them to be more observant, to follow subtle clues. Naruto picked up a rock and threw it in the puddle, seeing how the rock bounced off the top. The water tension was too dense to be normal rainwater. Seeing as the realization clicked, the three genin grabbed their kunai and jumped in formation around Tazuna. In succession, two rogue Chunin from Kiri rose from the puddle. One had the rock Naruto had thrown in his hand, bouncing it up and down. This will be too easy. The one murmured, jiggling the metal mechanism on his arm. We'll get paid in no time. They were vastly underestimating his kids. Kakashi stood back, taking a stance beside Tazuna. He motioned to the kids. Go. In an instant, Sasuke flickered in the air, throwing two kunai at the Chunin. The long cloaks they were wearing proved to be a horrible fashion choice as Sasuke's kunai nailed both of their arms to the tree behind them. The chain shot out of the mechanisms on the Chunin's arms, heading straight for Tazuna. Sakura threw it off course with her kunai, sending it colliding into the ground. Dirt dusted up around the chain, burying it into the packed earth. The kunai she was holding was thrown toward the mechanism, breaking the chain at the source. The Chunin ripped their cloaks free of the kunai and ran forward. They both head straight for Sakura, seeing her as the weak one. They were wrong. Sakura clenched her fists before punching the one closest to her in the face. Cracking bone echoed off the trees. He flew backward, splintering the tree trunk as his body collided with it. The other one stopped, eyes wide, as his friend flew past him. He soon joined his friend as Naruto and a clone each took one side and round kicked him into the tree. With two bodies hitting the same spot on the tree, the trunk cracked in half, falling to the side. The sound of the tree falling was deafening in the silent forest. As the three kids tied them up, Kakashi beamed with pride. The last time, Naruto had frozen, Sasuke had mocked him, and Sakura just fawned all over Sasuke. This time, they each had a part in the fight, they each did a great job, and none of them froze. Kakashi looked at Tazuna, who looked in awe. Holy shit, they can fight. Tazuna threw a fist in the air. Sakura jumped up as if just remembering the old man was there and turned around. She drew down her eyes and put her hands on her hips. You, old man, need to start talking. We are genin. We fight bandits, not rogue Chunin from Kiri. There's more to this whole story, isn't there? Tazuna looked taken back, his mouth opened and closed, trying to defend himself. The boys each took a side of Sakura, standing with their arms crossed. You're not just a bridge builder, are you? Naruto was tapping his foot on the ground. Who would want to kill you just over a bridge? Looking at Kakashi for help, and finding none, Tazuna sighed. All right. I lied. I couldn't afford Jounin to escort me, so I just asked for someone to deal with bandits. I'm a master bridge builder, to be precise. The land of waves is very impoverished. A shipping company set up shop there, controlling all the trade in and out of our village. In an effort to bring some economy to the village, I convinced people to help me build a bridge. Now, Gato is angry. If he takes me out, then the whole bridge dies. I need help, someone to watch me until the bridge is finished. You'll see when you get to the village how bad it is. I promise I'm not lying. Gato has been rumored to be into some shady dealings. Kakashi offered. It wasn't far-fetched for him to know this knowledge. The rumors had been circulating for years. Trafficking and drugs being the major ones. The kids weren't ignorant about the evil side of humanity. They were ninja, after all. They would be dealing with terrible people for the rest of their lives. But reading about it in school, hearing about it in rumors through the village, is an abstract concept. It's different when it's happening and you can physically see it. It's why some ninja, no matter how well trained, can't handle killing someone. There was even a rule that one could quit being a ninja if they are unable to kill. Many genin will not make it to Chiryunin simply because of that fact. Are there any other surprises? Sakura asked, still glaring at the old man. And don't lie to us. Tajuna shook his head. I'm telling you all I know. I promise. The three kids glanced at each other. Sasuke uncrossed his arms to slide his hands in his pockets. I think that we deserve more than C rank pay, don't you, Kakashi? Yeah. Naruto perked up. At least B rank. Sakura nodded along. Kakashi laughed at the shocked look on Tajuna's face. Well, if anything else happens on the way, we might even talk about A rank. Without hearing Tajuna's protests, Team 7 continued to move on, leaving the two Chiryunin tied around the fallen tree, still unconscious. Tajuna jugged to catch up, grumbling about ungrateful brats, to which no one listened. Kakashi knew they had a much stronger opponent soon. Zabuza and Haku were a whole new level the kids hadn't fought yet. The Chiryunin were easy for them, a great way to break them in. One of the 7 ninja swordsmen and his young ward were going to be a learning experience. So much was about to change for them. Sasuke was about to get his Sharingan and Naruto was about to experience the Kyuubi's power. They were laughing right now, reliving their fight and how well they did. Kakashi let them have their moment. They would need something happy in their minds for when they see the mess that Land of Waves is. The boatman was a tall, thin man with dark hair and a pointy straw hat. He was sitting on the dock with a fishing pole in his hand, just humming. Sasuke didn't know that someone couldn't hold a tune even while humming. He frowned as the man's voice cracked, the song unrecognizable through the butchered melody. Naruto grimaced, looking at Sasuke with an expression he'd never seen on the boy's face before. Sakura held her hands over her ears and wrinkled her nose in disdain. Tajuna, however, clapped the boatman on the back, greeting him warmly. Ah, Kaji, how are you? The hat on the man's head wobbled with how hard Tajuna hit him. Kaji stood up, adjusting his straw hat with a frown. Just waiting for you. Sorry. Tajuna rubbed the back of his neck. We had some surprises, but we're here now. Let's get going. Looking the team up and down, Kaji turned to Tajuna. They are what you hired? Really? He pointed to them. They're just kids, Tajuna. Oh ho. You should see them fight, Kaji. They're stronger than they look. Tajuna chose to ignore the curse Naruto mumbled under his breath. Sakura nudged the boy, hiding a laugh behind her hand. Childish, but strong. With a roll of his eyes, Kaji turned to Kakashi. Your kids don't get seasick, I hope. Kakashi shook his head. Good. Won't have anyone getting sick on my boat. We run the motor until we reach the fog, then we cut it. Go in quiet and slow. No one will know we're there. When we reach the fog, no talking. Got it. The kids nodded, even as Naruto rolled his eyes. The kid wasn't quiet in the last timeline, but hopefully, he would this time. Kakashi didn't know if he could hold back if the man corrected his kid this time. They crawled into the boat, each taking a seat on the benches. Tajuna climbed in and stretched out his legs, forcing Sakura to tuck hers under the bench. She glared at him, but he just smirked. You did good, Pinky. I was surprised at how good you fought. Tajuna was ignorant to the boys glaring at him, eyes were drawn down at his words. Sakura smiled sweetly and shrugged, the fakest expression she'd ever made. I'm training to be a medic nin. The tone of Sakura's voice was a warning all in its own. I can break all your bones while naming them. Kaji's hand slipped off the motor handle. And then, when I'm done, I can heal you right up. Tajuna gave a nervous laugh. Well then. He pulled his legs towards himself, giving Sakura her space back. I see that you kids are trained well. He gave another nervous laugh. I could really use a drink. The sentence hung in the air as the fog began rising around them. It felt suffocating, putting a gray haze around them, the precipitation hanging in the air and landing on their clothes. Sakura watched as tiny streams of water began running down her leg and into her sandal. Kaji cut the motor and let the boat coast through the fog. Naruto leaned over the side and let his fingers trail through the water surface, watching as the ripples stretched out. It took almost half an hour of coasting before the fog began to let up, giving them a longer field of vision. A long, concrete bridge loomed in front of them, standing out in the traditional village background. There it is. Tajuna motioned toward the structure. The bridge that will solve the poverty problem in Land of Waves. Naruto leaned on the edge of the boat, squinting in the fog to see the bridge they were sent to protect. That's it. He turned to Tajuna with a frown. Looks pretty finished to me. Tajuna bristled at him, but Kaji hushed them both. They were nearing a dock, a small cluster of buildings hiding in the fog. A young man was waiting at the end, looking nervous and shifting his eyes. When the boat came into view, he visibly relaxed. Thank the gods, Kaji. I was getting nervous out here. The young man grabbed at the rope Kaji threw and helped pull them to the dock. This was a shit job, Kaji. Rolling his eyes, Kaji climbed off the boat to help secure it to the dock. Yeah, well, my trip wasn't a walk in the park, either, kid. Once secured, Kaji shooed the young man away. Come on. He impatiently ushered the group from the boat. Good luck on the rest of your trip. The man was short-tempered and paranoid, but an efficient boatman. How he managed to navigate through the thick fog was a mystery. They climbed the stairs up the bank, entering the cluster of houses and one lonely market, whose shelves were empty. It had apparently been emptied for a while, cobwebs and dust lined the shelves. The shopkeeper looked bored, sitting back in his chair and reading a well-worn book. Their footsteps kicked up dust as they walked. The buildings were run down, boards missing from the outside, shingles falling off the roof. Little kids ran around, kicking old aluminum cans across the dusty road, their clothes tattered and frayed. It was a sad sight as they walked along, no one speaking until they reached the other side. Once the small village ended, and the path opened up into run-down farmland, Sakura looked up at Kakashi with a forlorn look on her face. Sensei, that village. They had no food. When I said Land of Waves was impoverished, what were you expecting? Tajuna barked out. Not every village is as rich as Konoha. Kakashi put a comforting hand on Sakura's shoulder. They never left Konoha before. How would you expect them to know? He leveled Tajuna with a glare. The old man shrugged. The path weaved through the farmlands and into a cluster of trees. It followed the river, water lapping against the bank not far from their feet. The grass was greener, well hydrated from being so close to nutrient-rich water. Small animals skittered around them, making little noises as the group passed. The cluster of trees opened up on one side with no warning to show a clearing, a small bank easing into the water. It looked like it was often used as a swimming hole. There were a couple of lounge chairs leaned back against a tree and a garbage can tucked into the bushes. Sakura stopped to pick up a rock, skipping it across the surface of the water. It was quiet, save for the sound of flowing water creating a soothing ambient background. The skipping rock caused small ripples in the water. It was midday, the sun high in the sky, beating down on their skin. Naruto's blue backpack jingled as he bent over to pick up a rock, attempting to skip it across the lake as Sakura had. Kakashi's nerves were on edge. Zabuza should show up any minute now. His kids were able to protect themselves, protect Tajuna, and Kakashi could handle himself. He wouldn't overuse the Sharingan this time. There is so much that was about to change. Kakashi was nervous, but he was ready. When the fog rolled in, a rustle in the bushes caused their ears to twitch, and their skin cascaded in goosebumps. Kakashi knew the time was now. A huge sword came flying at them, whipping the air, a hum ringing in their ears. Sakura pushed Tajuna to the ground as the others dropped down. The sword buried itself in a tree behind them. As they slowly got to their feet, a man appeared on the sword in a flicker. His outfit was perfectly described in the bingo book, which was currently sitting on the shelf in Kakashi's apartment. Mamakai Zabuza, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen, wielder of the Kubikaribasho or the decapitating carving knife, was an S-rank missing ninja from Kiri. A deep laugh rumbled through the trees as the kids surrounded Tajuna, Kunao at the ready. I can see why the 2 Chiryunin didn't finish the job. Zabuza looked at them over his shoulder. Sharingan Kakashi would have been too much for them to handle. Kakashi pulled his headband up, showing the glowing red eye. Mamakai Zabuza. Once a member of the Great Seven Ninja Swordsmen, now a hired mercenary? My, how the mighty have fallen. He wasn't scared of Zabuza this time. He knew Zabuza's moves, had fought him twice in his previous life and knew he could beat the man. He could feel his kids breathing behind him, their eyes burning into his back. Stay together, kids. Remember your teamwork. Zabuza laughed. A gray fog began rolling in, coating the area in a thick haze. 3 genin are no match for me and my blade. You, however, might be fun. He flickered in front of Kakashi, sword slung over his shoulder and glinting in the sunshine. So, let's leave the little ones for later. There were certain things Kakashi had come to terms with in his second chance. The overwhelming sense of déjà vu, random flashes of the past appearing in front of him at random times, and the subtle changes in past events. It amazed him how a small change in walk pattern, or a word changed in dialogue, could completely alter an event. Zabuza was already changing the pattern, already altering the timeline. As Zabuza pushed off the ground, sword swinging around in the air and aiming straight for his head, Kakashi took a second to close his eyes. If he took Zabuza out right now, what would happen? Haku was watching, hidden somewhere in the trees. He wouldn't let Zabuza be killed unless he didn't have a chance to stop it. But then Sasuke won't get the Sharingan and Naruto wouldn't get his resolve to be a hero. Kakashi couldn't do that to them. He couldn't take their defining moment away from them. Opening his eyes, Kakashi steeled himself for a blade. This was a water clone, he knew that. The real Zabuza was hiding in the water. Not moving out of the way, Kakashi buried a kunai into Zabuza's chest. Water ran out of the wound, over the kunai, and down his arm. It was as if popping a water balloon, the skin bursting apart and the water splashing around him. It was cold, causing goosebumps to crawl up his arms. The real Zabuza flickered in between the kids, sword poised to take the group out in one fell swoop. His kids were good, but not S rank, not yet. They were a moment too late, their reaction a fraction too slow, to stop the Kiri ninja. Kakashi got there first. The speed he'd gained over training in his past life pushing this body past its limits. He felt the muscles in his legs burn as he jumped in the fray, pushing his kids and Tajuna aside in the process. Kakashi took the kick to his stomach, letting himself fly backward into the water. His chakra kept him on top of the water, skidding to a stop. The kids were safe, all pushing themselves off the ground as Zabuza ran away from them and toward Kakashi. It took Zabuza all of 2 seconds to reach him, another kick aimed at his temple. Kakashi let himself drop under the water, dodging the kick. He used Zabuza's own momentum as he elbowed the man's ankle, sending him falling into the water. Taking a water ninja to a water fight is a bad idea, but Kakashi had something Zabuza didn't have. He had lightning. Pulling himself out of the water, Kakashi stood up, watching as Zabuza did the same. They faced off, staring each other down before Zabuza attempted to pull forth a jutsu. Kakashi played with him, copying the jutsu until Zabuza got frustrated. Sasuke grabbed Naruto's shoulder, pulling him to the side. A Zabuza clone whipped past him, sword poised to slice his neck. Pay attention. Sakura pushed Tajuna backward, taking a stance in front of him. She nodded at Sasuke, showing that she had the old man. They were free to fight. It's a clone. We just need to pop it. Naruto nodded before summoning a clearing full of himself. The clones threw themselves at the water clone, knocking him to the ground, all kicking and punching. It wasn't long before the clones went flying, popping in midair or as soon as they hit the ground. The Zabuza clone stood up, cracking his neck and glaring at the boys. Catch! Naruto threw a demon shuriken at Sasuke, who caught it with ease. A realization hit Sasuke's face as his hand clasped around the metal. There were 2 of them, and one was warm. The Naruto that stayed behind wasn't the real Naruto. This demon shuriken was. Sasuke nodded, flickering in the air before throwing both shuriken toward the real Zabuza. They watched as he jumped over it, breaking his eye contact from Kakashi, and faced the shore. He wasn't paying attention when the shuriken transformed back into Naruto, who threw a kunai directly towards the Kiri ninja's head. Just a fraction of a second too slow, Zabuza leaned his head to the side, the kunai slicing neatly through the man's ear. Taking advantage of the pain the man was in, Kakashi used his own jutsu against him, sending a water dragon towards Zabuza, careening him into a tree. As he sat there, bleeding and hurting, 3 senbon pierced his neck. Haku dropped from the trees, grabbing him and disappearing. This time, the boy didn't stop to talk to them, didn't fake an explanation. This time, he just grabbed Zabuza and fled. Tajuna hadn't said a word the entire fight, just stood there behind Sakura, surprise on his face. Kakashi dragged himself toward the shore, clothes soaked and heavy, hair clinging to his forehead. He didn't overdo the Sharingan this time. He'd make it back to the village on his own. Naruto also climbed out of the water, trudging alongside his sensei. Sakura met them at the shore, checking for any damages and attempting to heal them. Even though she was just learning, minor bumps and scrapes were easy for her to heal. Kakashi let her fuss over him, tending to a cut on his arm from the huge sword. Although it would leave a thin white line, Sakura healed it quickly. It would take more practice for her to heal without leaving a scar. Well. Tajuna put his hands on his hips, standing up straight. I think you 4 deserve a drink and some food. Come with me to my house. You guys can get all cleaned up there. Kakashi nodded at the man. Thank you. He looked at his team, 3 kids who had proven their skills beyond a shadow of a doubt. You all did great. I'm proud of you all. He paused to let them all preen in their own way. We should be able to rest for the day. Zabuza wasn't dead. He will be back. Until then, we rest, train, and prepare. Tajuna led the way, the 3 kids keeping up with his pace. Kakashi slowly trudged behind, his mind a jumble. The boys mainly did the same thing this time as last time. Would their fight with Haku go the same way? Would he have to see Sasuke looking near death? See Naruto surrounded in red and orange chakra, red eyes, and claws? Would he have to watch Sakura cry over Sasuke and Naruto, begging for them to be okay? Kakashi wasn't sure if he could handle it again. No, they had time. He would prepare them, train them, make them ready to handle themselves. This time, Sakura would be in the middle of the fight. She wouldn't stay back as she did before. He had to have faith in his kids. Faith in his training. Sensei! Naruto yelled, walking backward. Hurry up. I'm starving. They would be fine. They were strong. Kakashi jogged to catch up, apologizing to Naruto for slacking behind. They would be fine. Kakashi hoped if he kept repeating it, kept it a mantra in his head, it would comfort him. He could make himself believe it. They would be fine. Chapter 15, Deja Vu. The woods opened up to a cluster of buildings. The path was dry, packed hard as stone. Dust kicked up as the group walked, their sandals brown with grime. Buildings were falling down, in disrepair, panels hanging off the walls, slats off the roofs. In some places fabric was used as makeshift windows, blocking out the worst of the dirt and sea air. The ambient background of water splashing against the shore drowned out the majority of farm animal noises, as thin and sick as they were. Farmland sitting behind the houses was pitiful, rows upon rows of wilted and dry plants. Along with the civilians, stray dogs and cats prowled around, scrounging for food where they could find it. A small child chased one dog with a fish in its mouth down the path, dodging a couple of adults and disappearing between 2 houses. The dull background shades of brown were broken up by the deep blue water of the ocean and the bright gray of the bridge. What passed for a village, which was just a small grouping of run-down buildings, was nestled next to the ocean. A long pier jutted from the inlet, boats floating in the ebb and flow while roped to poles. Men with fishing lines are dotted along the pier, all with small metal buckets full of bait at their sides. It should have been a prominent fishing village, able to trade their catch for money. With the state of the village, it was clear that was not happening. Sakura looked distraught. She watched as the civilians walked around with empty baskets in hand, scrounging for food. Market stalls only had wilted vegetables and small fish, barely enough to feed a single person let alone a family. Tajuna strolled through the village, head held high as though he wasn't showing off a ghost town. The people looked sad, pitiful like they were just waiting to waste away. Her small hand reached out, gripping Kakashi's sleeve between her fingers. "Sensei, can we help them? It should get better after the bridge is completed." Kakashi slowed down his pace, bringing Sakura to a stop. "They just have to hold on a little longer. We will be here to make sure nothing gets in the way, right?" Sakura nodded. She didn't look too placated, but she gave him a small smile. Her fingers never left his sleeve for the rest of the walk. At the far end of the village, overlooking a rocky outcrop, sat a larger house. Waves crashed against the outcrop, ocean spray hitting the group in the face. A young woman stood on a large porch, banging the dust out of a rug. She looked up and, upon seeing Tajuna, glared intensely. "You told me a few days." She dropped the rug on the banister and stomped down the path. "You were gone a week, father." The woman poked Tajuna in the chest. "Do you have any idea what your workers have gone through? There are people here every day, thugs threatening to attack them. We got in a bit of trouble, Tsunami. But I'm here now, and I've brought help." He motioned toward the team behind him. "This is Hatake Kakashi and his team of little terrors. Oh, you should see them fight, Tsunami. Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto." Kakashi supplied, patting each of his kids on the head. "Pleasure to meet you." Tsunami nodded. "Yeah, that's wonderful. Get in here." She motioned for everyone to enter the house. Kakashi knew her gruff exterior was just a mask. She was a heartbroken woman, using anger and lashing out as a defense. He just smiled at her, ushering his kids inside. Naruto marveled at the porch, running his hand over the banister. "This is what I was thinking, sensei." He turned to look at Kakashi. "A porch like this." Sasuke paused next to him, looking around at the addition. "With, like, a bench or something." "A swing," Sasuke offered. "Better than a bench." As the two boys stepped through the doorway, Kakashi filed that piece of information away. He already had an idea of how the house should look, how the additions should look. Putting Tenzo in a genjutsu, using his Sharingan to show the man the blueprints, was his plan. But, first, he had to get his kids back home safe and sound. Inside Tajuna's home, the man went straight to his living area, flopping himself on the ground and groaning. "My feet are killing me. Tsunami, bring me a drink." There was some growling from the kitchen, and some mumbling, before the dark-haired woman stomped in the room. "Here." A bottle of dark beer was thrust into Tajuna's hands. "Enjoy." The tone of her voice showed she wanted him to do anything but enjoy it. There were footsteps in the hallway before a small boy rounded the corner. "Grandpa." He threw himself at Tajuna, wrapping his little arms around the man's neck. "You're finally home." "Oh, Inari." The old man set his beer down, grabbing the boy by the waist and standing him up. "Sorry it took me so long. We got into a bit of a pickle." He motioned toward the team. "But these guys protected me. Some real-life heroes, they are." Inari drew his eyes down. "Heroes don't exist." He crossed his arms and pouted. Kakashi clamped a hand on Naruto's shoulder before he could say anything. Last time, the blonde got into a heated argument with the kid. He didn't want a return of that conversation. "Besides, Grandpa, they're just kids. What is your problem?" Naruto bit out. Kakashi squeezed his shoulder tighter. The blonde snapped his mouth closed. Tsunami yelled from the kitchen and Inari ran toward her. "Brat!" Naruto snarled after the boy left the room. Sakura chided him, but Tajuna waved her off. Inari changed a lot recently. His stepfather, Kaiza, was killed. He was trying to change things around here, trying to inspire the civilians to fight back. Well, Kaiza inspired me, anyway. Gato's thugs didn't like that. They killed him. Inari always called him his hero. But once Kaiza died, he claims heroes don't exist, they just get killed. Tajuna huffed. "I messed up by calling you kids heroes. That's on me." Inari sat right next to Tajuna at dinner later. He refused to look at anyone else but his family. Instead, Tajuna carried the conversation, keeping Kakashi nodding and humming at the appropriate times. Naruto sat his bowl of rice down on the table and began pulling on Kakashi's sleeve. Hey, hey. Sensei. Are we going to train while we're here? So we can beat that Zabuza guy with the big sword. Naruto still had rice stuck to his cheek and chin. Sasuke scoffed. Wipe your mouth, loser. He caught the chopstick flying toward him between two pale fingers. Idiot. Kakashi caught Naruto by the upper arm before he could launch himself over the table. Maybe we should start with training your patience. Naruto just stuck his tongue out. Maybe your maturity, too. Yeah, definitely his maturity, Sasuke said with a smirk. Kakashi kept the grip on Naruto's arm, forcing the blonde to sit down. Since Naruto couldn't fight with his fists, he chose to fight with his mouth. As the two argued, Sakura kept moving her rice around with her chopsticks, looking deep in thought. Sakura. Kakashi drew her attention. What's wrong? She bit her lip, her green eyes darting around, looking nervous. Is Kenjutsu something you think I could do? I know my physical skills aren't anywhere near where the boys are, but... Kakashi tilted his head, surprised at her question. Since when had Sakura had an interest in weapons? She was always relying on her fists, her brute strength, to fight. Had the time skip changed something that small? Never know unless you try. We can give it a shot. Truth was, it was the academy that prompted Sakura's interest in weapons. Iruka had invited Gekko Hayate to class. The kids were young, still in single digits, when the dark-haired Jounin walked onto the training area, katana at his back. Iruka introduced him, explaining how Hayate was a Jounin and one of the strongest Kenjutsu ninjas in Konoha. When the man pulled the long, silver sword out, the rectangular guard dark black against his hand, Sakura was entranced. The grace in his movements, the way the sword was treated like an extension of his arm, and all Sakura could think was how she wanted to do that. But, when mentioned to her parents, she got told how it wasn't good for girls to use weapons. It will cause calluses on her hands, and no man wants a woman with rough hands. But her parents weren't in charge of her anymore. She was a genin. She was out of their house. Inoichi didn't tell her she had to be the perfect girl. He didn't expect her to be a good wife and stay in the kitchen. Inoichi listened when she talked and encouraged her. Kakashi didn't laugh at her, didn't shoot her down. Instead, her sensei was willing to give her interest a chance. Sakura smiled at him, happy to be heard. Naruto had been training in a small clearing for 2 weeks. Just him and his team, practicing sensing enemies through the heavy fog by being blindfolded. They had hidden in the woods all over, trying their best to get one over on the others. The thing was, Naruto wasn't used to being constantly around other people. Before he'd moved in with Kakashi and Sasuke, Naruto was very used to spending days upon days on his own. Sometimes, now that he had constant companionship, he just needed a break, a time out. He found his solace in the woods, again, as he weaved his way in and around trees and bushes. He came across a clearing, a large stretch of meadow full of flowers blowing gently in the breeze. Naruto smiled, sitting down in the center and stretching his arms out, feeling the petals brush his hands. It was a sweet scent that hung in the air, just shy of being too much. A lot of the flowers Naruto couldn't name. Learning about flowers and herbs was mainly kept to the girls in the academy, but Naruto loved plants. He wished the plants could be carried home, planted in colorful pots that could sit around Kakashi's apartment. But, no, they wouldn't live long enough. Nor could he sit them around every available surface. That apartment wasn't his, he couldn't just surround himself in foliage as he would before. His ears picked up the crackling sound of someone walking through the woods. It didn't feel like anyone he knew, he had his team memorized by now. No, this was someone new. He looked up, blue eyes trained on the trees where the sound came from, and saw a young woman enter the clearing, a small basket in her hands. Oh, hello. She smiled, bowing slightly. Am I disturbing you? Naruto tilted his head to the side. No, you're not. I just thought this place was pretty. It is. She glanced around the clearing. So, you're just here to see something pretty? Naruto blushed, rubbing the back of his head. Or for some other reason? He worried his lip between his teeth. Sometimes I just need a break. Does that make sense? The woman sat down in front of him, setting the basket to her side. Everyone needs a break sometimes. I see your headband. Do you need a break from your ninja team? She began picking herbs from between the flowers, laying them gently into the basket. Naruto watched her for a moment, saw the delicate way she plucked the herbs neatly from the ground. Yeah, but not because I don't like them or anything. Just, I'm not used to it, I guess. I'm used to being alone a lot. Her big, brown eyes looked at him, questioning. She didn't push it, however, just lowered her eyes again. I was like that, too. Alone. But all of that changes when you find your precious person. She looked up at him again. Do you have a precious person? Someone who is important to you? Special. The team picture they'd had taken a few weeks earlier, where the two boys glared at each other and Sakura looked so happy between them, flashed before his eyes. Another image of Iruka, bleeding and haggard against a tree, defending Naruto, and giving him the headband, followed after. Then Shikamaru, Koji, and Ino, Tuki and Ayam. Yeah. Naruto breathed out. I have a few of them. He gave a sad smile. His constant fear of losing them like a mantra in his head. Yes. The woman looked so knowing as if she could read his mind. It's different going from being alone to having people around you. It can be terrifying. Naruto's eyes snapped to hers. However, it can also be powerful. Gives you strength when you have none. Gives you hope. She pulled the basket closer to her, seeing how many herbs she had gathered. He looked toward the ground, his mind wrapping around the woman's words. He fidgeted his hands, wringing them together, as he thought. The woman watched him, finding a couple more herbs to fill the silence. You said you're not alone anymore. She cocked her head to the side before nodding. So, now that you have someone precious to you, does that mean they are family? Family. She gave Naruto a small smile. Yes, I suppose family would be one way to put it. Is that how you feel about your team? Are they your family? Yeah. Naruto quit worrying his hands, instead he began plucking blades of grass from around his feet. I never had a family before. But I think this would be what it feels like. He smiled. I want to protect them, so they never go away. The woman pushed herself up, grabbing the basket as she went. Well, then. She brushed some grass off her knees. I think you have found your precious people. Keep them close. Thanks, lady. Naruto stood up, too. Waving as she walked off. The woman paused before reaching the tree line. Oh, by the way, I'm a man. Oh. Naruto's eyes were wide. Sorry. The person he'd been talking to, a man, apparently, just laughed as they walked away. Feeling embarrassed, Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. He knew that he should head back, but the flowers were so pretty. Sakura would love it here, but he wasn't sure when they'd have time to come back. Instead, Naruto decided to bring the flowers to her. The sun was beginning to set when Sasuke jogged toward the woods. He hadn't seen Naruto for over half an hour, he was beginning to get worried. Sasuke flared out his senses when he reached the tree line. He immediately latched onto Naruto's chakra, but there was another person with him, one he didn't recognize. Sasuke's immediate thought was that Naruto was in trouble. His legs sprung off the ground, racing through the woods. It was a small dirt path, weeds growing around the edges and through the middle. He dodged low-hanging tree limbs and roots that broke through the ground. Someone in a pink kimono rounded a thick tree trunk, making Sasuke slow his pace. It was the presence he'd sensed with Naruto. They smiled as they passed, the basket in their hand bouncing against their hip. Sasuke gave them a brisk nod, continuing along the path. There was something off about the other person, but he didn't pause to contemplate it. He found Naruto knelt down in the clearing, a bouquet of flowers in his hand. There was another one lying beside his knee. Idiot, what are you doing? Sasuke stopped beside Naruto. The blonde looked up, holding out the bouquet in his hand. Aren't they pretty? His blue eyes shimmered as the smile grew. I made one for Sakura and one for Tsunami. Naruto wiggled the bouquet in his hand. Hold this one so I can tie the other one. Begrudgingly, Sasuke took hold of the flowers, frowning. Hey, did you see that girl, I mean, guy? He was wearing pink. He was picking herbs. Yeah, I passed him. Sasuke didn't mention that, when he sensed the person, his immediate thought was that Naruto was in trouble. He kept that to himself. You done yet? Dinner is almost ready. One final tug of the vine and the bouquet was fastened. Naruto jumped up, smiling as he thrust that one in Sasuke's face, also. All done. Come on, I wanna show them. With his free hand, he grasped onto Sasuke's and pulled him along, babbling about the mysterious guy. Hey, Sasuke. Do you have anyone precious to you? What do you mean? Naruto shrugged. Yeah, no, like people you want to protect? People you care about. He glanced at Sasuke from the corner of his eye. Oh. There was a long pause as Sasuke thought about his answer. Did he have people like that? When he was little, he had his parents, Itachi and Shisui. They were his whole world until he was 7. Then his world crashed down. Until he was 12, Sasuke would have said he had no one. He was alone with his ghosts and hate and anger. But now, life was different. Now he had a team, a cocoon of warmth he let himself fall into. The hate and anger weren't gone, but it wasn't at a rapid boil anymore. Instead, it was replaced with friends, a home, and constant companionship. And, as much as it killed him to admit it, he wouldn't be able to leave. Not now, not ever. Yeah. I do. Today is the day, kids. Tazuna practically bounced into the room. If all goes to plan, the bridge will be finished by dinner today. He held out a hand, waiting for Sasuke to give him a high five. Sasuke just gave him a flat look. Oh, come on, kid. Lighten up. Instead, Tazuna used that hand to slap Sasuke on the back. You can go back home soon. Sakura giggled. I'm excited. She held out her hand for the high five. Tazuna laughed as they clapped their hands together. What about Geto, though? It wasn't the first time Sakura had asked this question, and still no one really had an answer. Tazuna hoped that, with trade re-established, Geto would just phase himself out. But that was a pipe dream. The village still had an uphill battle in getting the man to leave. Especially with all the thugs that were kept on salary. Tazuna thought that, maybe, with their first big payday, they could hire some jounin to successfully drive the man out. But that could be months, maybe even years, out. Haven't gotten that far yet, Pinky. Tazuna admitted. One step at a time. Naruto frowned at him. That's a pretty important step, don't you think? Tazuna laughed, excited to get to the bridge and finally see it finished. Well, let's take that important step after, okay? Without waiting for an answer, the old man waved to his daughter and grandson and stepped out the door. The team looked at each other, shrugged, and followed after. Their first warning something was off was how quiet the town was. No one was out, no one was meandering through the streets, it was dead quiet. Like people were hiding. The hair stood up on Naruto's neck, something was wrong. He tugged on Sasuke's arm coverings, shooting the boy a look. Sasuke nodded in return, reaching over and tapping the back of Sakura's hand. The three of them were on the same page, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Tazuna, seemingly, saw nothing wrong, and just kept trotting along. Kakashi watched his kids, proud of how observant they'd become, how wary of their surroundings they were. It wasn't until Tazuna reached the bridge that he realized something was wrong. Some of his workers were laying on the bridge, seemingly knocked out. The old man paused and his mouth dropped open. What happened? Zabuza. Sakura breathed out. He's back. In the blink of an eye, the genin surrounded Tazuna, Konoha at the ready. A laugh echoed around them, deep and rumbling. Then came the fog, so thick it clung to skin and clothes. Zabuza appeared in front of them, sword gripped at the hilt, a playful glint in his eye. Behind him, another person appeared, a ceramic mask held over their face. They were silent as if awaiting orders. Kakashi waited, preparing himself for what was to come. They will be okay. He closed his eyes and just breathed. They were strong. They were ready. It's not like last time. He wasn't sending 3 genin into the slaughter unprepared. Not this time. They were steady, they were trained, they were ready. Kakashi. Zabuza's voice rang out, sounding as if it was coming from the fog itself. I see you brought your kids with you. And look, this one is shaking. It was directed at Sasuke, who just smirked. Kakashi caught it out of his peripheral vision. Are you sure you want to do this, Zabuza? It didn't end well for you last time. All he got for an answer was the team being surrounded by water clones. Sasuke, go. In a flash, the water clones were destroyed, a circle of water surrounding them. Still time to back out, you and your friend. Just because your kid destroyed a few water clones, I'm supposed to be afraid. The real Zabuza motioned toward the person behind him. Haku. There was a flicker, and then a kunai was aimed straight for Sasuke's head. He dropped down, letting it slice through the air above him, before swiping at Haku's legs. Haku jumped backward, heels sliding over the concrete. Sasuke was on him in an instant, kunai sparking in the fog as they clashed. Naruto and Sakura stayed still, guarding their ward. Naruto kept watching the guy, though. Something about him seemed familiar. The long, lanky build reminded him of someone, but who? He was jerked back into reality as Zabuza's sword swung toward Kakashi's head, the Jounin ducking just in time. Sakura sucked in a breath as the sword sent wind flying in her direction. Zabuza. You have fallen far, haven't you? Running from Kiri, dodging tracking ninja and large bounties on your head, doesn't it ever get tiring? Selling yourself to the highest bidder? To a horrible man like Gato? Don't you think your friend deserves better? Kakashi was treading lightly, trying not to imply knowing more than he should. Rumors ran wild about Zabuza's defection, it wouldn't be suspicious for him to know that. But knowing about Haku was a different story. He shouldn't know anything about that boy. You know nothing about me, Kakashi. Nor do you know anything about Haku. Fight me like a man. Stop hiding behind words. Zabuza pushed off the ground, aiming a kunai straight at Kakashi's Sharingan. The kunai was deflected by the metal guard on Kakashi's glove. Let's take your ace in the hole out of play. Kakashi pushed against him, making Zabuza stumble backward. Afraid of the Sharingan, are you? There was a thud that sounded through the fog. Haku grunting in pain as Sasuke threw him to the ground. Sounds like Haku is having some trouble over there. It might be a low blow, using the knowledge of how Zabuza actually felt about Haku against him, but it was working. Zabuza could hide it all he wanted, but he did love that boy like a son. Should we check on him? Zabuza gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, whipping it over his head and aiming straight for Kakashi. The problem with a sword that big is how much time you waste getting the force behind a swing. He put a kunai into Zabuza's forearm, sending the sword flying off to the side. There was a cry of pain before Zabuza stumbled back again. Haku was bleeding from his arm and side. He needed an out. He needed a way to escape Sasuke's barrage of attacks. The sword arced around them, skidding to a stop behind Haku. It distracted Sasuke just long enough for Haku to jump back, just out of reach. Before Sasuke could react, Haku made a flurry of hand signs. A circle of mirrors surrounded them, Sasuke whipping his head back and forth as they formed. He heard Naruto yell out through the fog, heard Sakura shout his name, but the mirrors made everything outside drown out. Goosebumps cascaded up and down his exposed skin, the mirrors radiating cold air. Then the Senbon began to fly, slicing through pale skin and shredding through his clothes. The first yelp of pain from Sasuke sent a jolt through Naruto. He held the kunai tightly, keeping his place next to Tajuna, but his body was screaming to run. He wanted to run to Sasuke, to help him, to protect him. Naruto! Help Sasuke! Kakashi's voice boomed out through the fog. Another clash of kunai to kunai rang out as Naruto raced past them, towards Sasuke. Kakashi had a moment of fear, a flash from the past of Sasuke covered in blood and Senbon, but shook it off. Not this time. They will be fine. There was a growling yell before the circle of mirrors was covered in blonde ninja. Naruto's were hanging from the ice mirrors, beating them with kunai and fists and feet. The original leaned over Sasuke, who had landed on his back at some point, and held out his hand. "How do we beat him?" Naruto asked, pulling Sasuke to his feet. He reached up and picked a senbon that had gotten stuck in Sasuke's headband. "Apparently brute force isn't working." Sasuke rolled his eyes. "Apparently." He frowned, thinking back on the fight so far. "They're clones, I think. We have to get the original to come out." Before Naruto could answer, senbon rained down on them, popping clone after clone, bouncing off the bridge, slicing through their skin and clothes. Sasuke fought to keep his eyes open, to look for an opening. If he focused hard enough, ignored the pain long enough, he could see the original. He counted it off. Clone, 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 original, clone, clone. Sasuke's eyes widened. He needed to see it again, just one more time. With one look at Naruto, the boy read his mind. Another wave of clones was sent off, causing the senbon to rain down on them again. It was the same pattern, 1, 2, 3, original, 5, 6. He could see it. He could predict it. "You, got anything?" Naruto asked, wincing as he pulled a senbon from his collarbone. "It's getting prickly in here." Sasuke snorted. "Yeah, I think I do." "Can you do it again?" Naruto nodded. "Stay beside me, don't get in front of me." Again, Naruto nodded. Another set of clones fanned out, one for each ice mirror around them. Sasuke kept an eagle eye on the sky, watching for some sign of Haku, counting down until the original showed himself. The hand signs for the fireball were formed, pulling the chakra into his chest and letting it build. With his free hand, he pushed Naruto backward and slightly behind him, and let his fireball out. Sasuke knew he wouldn't kill Haku, but he wanted to make a mark, make the original easier to identify. A burn covering his left leg, disintegrating a section of the pant leg, and singing the sandals he wore, proved that Sasuke more than hit his mark. Sakura felt useless, standing there with a kunao in her hand as she just watched. Her teammates were fighting, and she was standing there, doing nothing. The thick fog was beginning to fade, giving Sakura more field of vision. She faintly saw the glint of Zabuza's sword as it rested against the edge of the bridge. Ahead of her, the huge circle of ice mirrors loomed in the distance. She wanted to know what was going on, wanted to help, but her job was to guard Tajuna. "Pinky." Tajuna tapped her on the shoulder. "Go. I'll be fine." Sakura shook her head. "I can't. My job is to guard you. Your job is to fight the bad guys. This is not fighting." She turned to look at Tajuna. He had a smile on his face. "Help your team. I'll be fine." Before Sakura could decide what to do, she heard her sensei let out a yell. Kakashi fell backward, landing at her feet. There was blood on his chest and face. Sakura couldn't tell if it was his or Zabuza's, but it shook her. Although her sensei jumped up, going back into the fray, her nerves were on edge. The sword was glinting in the corner of her eye. Sasuke and Naruto yelled out something from inside the ice mirrors. She saw the bright light of Sasuke's fire jutsu gleaming in the distance. It was all too much. She had to help. From inside the ice mirrors, Sasuke had his eyes trained on Haku. He knew where the real one was, now he needed to figure out how to break the ice. The fireball wasn't hot enough to melt the ice completely. Haku fixed it as soon as it began to melt. The fire vortex he had been learning burned hotter than the fireball. It could work, or it could hurt Naruto in the process. There was no way for Naruto to get out, Haku would stop him at every turn. They withstood another rain of senbon before Sasuke had made up his mind. He grabbed the front of Naruto's jacket, pulling the blonde tight against him, before making the hand signs for his fire vortex. The flames burned hotter than anything he'd ever felt. It swirled in front of them, the heat hitting the chill from the ice, forming steam in the air. Naruto turned his head, burying it in Sasuke's shoulder, the heat too much for his eyes to handle. The flames whipped around, the ice mirrors hissing as steam rose up around them. Sasuke watched as boiling water dripped onto the bridge, the ice slowly shrinking. Haku tried to fix it and reform the ice, but he couldn't do it in time. The flames were faster than he was. Seeing it as a losing battle, Haku jumped out of the ice, sending senbon raining down again as he fled. As the water fell around them, and the vortex slowly burned out, Sasuke held onto Naruto tightly and jumped out of the line of the Senbon. The blonde lifted his head, looking around at the melted ice. Holy shit! It worked. Naruto thrust his fist in the air. He bounced around in front of Sasuke, celebrating a little too early. Sasuke saw it half a second before it made contact. A Senbon flying through the air, aiming straight at them. He tried to pull Naruto out of the way, to keep him from getting struck by the sharp metal. It would hit his spine if it stayed on target. He watched it, it felt like everything was happening in slow motion. Sasuke put his hand on the back of Naruto's neck. The Senbon would bury itself in the back of his hand instead, saving Naruto. The world around him slowed down further, his vision getting crisper, able to focus onto one object with pinpoint accuracy. Blue eyes widened a moment before the Senbon buried itself in Sasuke's pale skin. He winced, the pain radiating through his hand and into his wrist. It burned. Naruto jerked to the side, turning around to see Sasuke's hand. It was turning purple and black, the colors cascading up his arm, almost to his elbow. He was ripping at the arm coverings, trying to get them off, groaning in pain. Naruto tried to help, tried to get the buckle loose. When it finally fell off, the indentations were bright red, the arm swelling to twice its size. Sasuke was cursing, groaning, dropping to his knees, and cradling his arm to his chest. He looked up at Naruto, his eyes red and black. Sasuke had done it, he'd activated the Sharingan, and now he was afraid he was losing his arm. With a sharp tug, he managed to pull the Senbon out. It was dripping with a purple liquid, the same liquid pooling on Sasuke's skin through the hole. The black and red eyes were wide, watching Naruto's face, scared. The blonde watched as the red and black slowly faded, giving way to his normal dark color. Then they closed as Sasuke wavered on his knees before falling over. Naruto caught him in his arms. Sasuke. Naruto shook him. Sasuke, please, open your eyes. He's dying, kid. The Kyuubi's voice boomed in his head. The skin on Sasuke's arm was stretched taut with the swelling. It was poison. Haku had sent it to Naruto. It would have hit him in the spine. It could have killed him. That boy was trying to kill you. Instead, he hit the Uchiha. He needs to pay, kid. The fear was slowly replaced by anger. The Kyuubi's chakra was restless, slowly seeping through the seal, corrupting the chakra coils, red overtaking blue. Naruto could feel the nails on his hands grow, become long and sharp. The whisker marks on his cheeks deepened, stretching along his cheeks and towards his ears. He gently laid Sasuke on the ground, careful of his purple and black arm. He could see everything in a new light, his vision crisp and clear. The anger and fear fought for dominance inside of him. Get him, kid. Make him pay. He looked up, his body coiled to pounce. Getting on all fours, Naruto began to run. He busted through the boiling water, skidding to a stop as he looked for that boy. Haku was watching, his eyes wide, mask splintered on the ground. Naruto sprung toward him, claws swiping through the air. Haku jumped backward, trying to stay out of reach. A claw hit his jaw, the skin slicing open, blood rushing down his neck and into his collar. Zabuza felt the powerful chakra, saw it curling in the air, circling the blonde where he was attacking Haku. He watched as his ward ducked down, hand holding his chin tightly, blood seeping through his fingers. Kakashi paused, his eyes centered on Naruto. Forgetting about the Jounin for a moment, Zabuza flickered toward Haku, taking the next hit from Naruto in the back. 4 slices formed on his shirt, the blood running down his back and dripping on the ground. Kakashi yelled for Naruto to stop. He looked for Sasuke, seeing the blue shirt and dark hair lying on the ground. With a kunai in his hand, Zabuza turned and buried it in Naruto's stomach. The kid didn't stop, just kept swiping his claws over and over again. Haku yelled out, pushing Zabuza out of the way. With a kick, he pushed the kunai further into Naruto's stomach, finally causing enough pain for the blonde to stop. His red eyes widened, hands immediately going to the kunai, attempting to pull it out. Kakashi grabbed his hands, stopping him. Don't. You'll bleed out. Kakashi let go of his hands to cup Naruto's face. Come back to me, okay? Look at me. As Zabuza laid on the ground, blood from his wounds pooling around him, Haku was standing there, watching Kakashi try to find Naruto in his haze of anger. The red eyes were slowly fading to blue, the claws receding back into his normal blunt nails. Haku took his moment, pulling another senbon from his sleeve. He readied his stance, ready to throw another poisoned piece of metal straight at Kakashi. Then a sharp pain hit his leg, his balance failing. He hit the cement hard, his leg screaming in pain. When he looked down, it was to see the limb severed below the knee. Sakura stood there, Zabuza's large sword in her hand, breathing heavily. She had a dangerous look on her face, one that promised pain. "Don't fucking touch my team." The sword screeched as she slid it across the bridge. "I'll chop the other one off." Crawling across the ground, Zabuza went to Haku's side. His hands fluttered over the boy, afraid to touch him but wanting to help. The wounds on his back still seeping, dripping on the ground. Haku was losing blood quickly, his skin turning a sickly gray. Zabuza looked at Kakashi, his eyes pleading. "Please. Help him." The Jounin looked to Sakura, who was still gripping the sword tightly. She seemed to come back to her senses, her green eyes shimmering as she took in what she did. Sakura hit her knees, holding green glowing hands over the severed limb. She stopped the bleeding, the stump still red and painful. Naruto stumbled forward, grabbing Zabuza by the shoulder. "Is there an antidote to that poison he uses?" Sakura's head snapped toward him before turning around, looking for Sasuke. She ran over to him, hitting her knees in front of the boy. "Please. We helped you." The Kiri Rogue ninja reached into Haku's pocket, pulling out a small syringe. "Hurry. The limb will eventually die and fall off." Taking the syringe, he ran toward Sasuke, thrusting the antidote in Sakura's hands. Kakashi turned to Zabuza, seeing the broken and bleeding duo. "Take Haku and leave. Don't come back to the land of waves again." Looking relieved, Zabuza struggled to his feet, picking up an unconscious Haku. He slowly stumbled down the bridge, disappearing into the woods. Kakashi ran to his kids, seeing Sasuke laying there, arm black and purple and swollen beyond recognition. Naruto looked terrified, shaking with tears in his eyes. There was a sizzling sound as the Kyuubi healed Naruto's stomach. Slowly, the kunai was pushed out. He didn't even notice when it slid to the ground. Sakura's face was pale and blank. He heard footsteps behind them, Tajuna running to see what was going on. "Oh, God." The old man put a hand over his mouth in shock. "Let's get him home. Somewhere safe." In a trance, feeling deja vu in the worst way, Kakashi slowly picked Sasuke up, carrying him carefully toward Tajuna's house. Sakura and Naruto flanked him, each gripping Kakashi's sleeves tightly. Tajuna followed, ignoring the unconscious workers on the bridge. The civilians were peeking out their windows, but the group ignored them. Tsunami met them at the door, eyes wide as she let them in. Going straight to the futons they'd been sleeping on, Kakashi laid Sasuke down gently, laying his arm out carefully. Sakura hit the floor, holding her green glowing hands over the arm. It was a tense few moments, everyone watching Sakura attempt to heal Sasuke. Inari was holding onto Tsunami's skirt, tears in his eyes. Naruto returned his grip to Kakashi's sleeve, shaking. Sakura was sweating with concentration, but her work was paying off. Slowly, the arm returned to normal size, the swelling filtering out. Black and purple liquid bubbled to the surface, coming out of his pores, seeping into the futon. Sasuke began to groan, eyes squeezing shut, his mouth in a grimace as the pain overtook him once again. The colors faded from Sasuke's arm, leaving it looking more and more normal. Sakura breathed a sigh of relief, the antidote doing its job and her healing helping push it through. The last thing that healed was the hole in his hand. "Okay, I think it's all out." Sakura wiped the sweat from her forehead. "That arm will be sore for a while, probably a little numb, but it should come back." She put a hand on Sasuke's forehead. "He has a slight fever. Tsunami, can you get me a cold rag?" "Of course." The woman swept out the room. Naruto let out a choked noise, relief rushing over him. He saved me?" A sob racked his body. Haku tried to poison me, but Sasuke took it instead. He jolted as if remembering something. He got the Sharingan, sensei. He finally got it. Putting a hand on Naruto's shoulder, Kakashi smiled at him. That's great. I'm sure, when he wakes up, he'll be eager to learn all about it. He looked down at the boy, seeing the pain on his face slowly fade. He will wake up. No one knew if he was trying to convince himself or them. He needed a way. He needed to walk. The fight happened, the one Kakashi had been dreading, and things happened all over again, albeit a little different. Sasuke still nearly died, Naruto still released the Kyuubi, but so much changed. He let Zabuza and Haku go. What made him do it was still beyond him. Sakura used Zabuza's sword and cut Haku's leg off. That, in itself, was a huge change. Rain sprinkled down on him as he walked in the moonlight. Sakura and Naruto were keeping vigil by Sasuke's side. The boy was safe, just nursing a fever. Nothing he wouldn't get over. At least he didn't lose his arm. That was Kakashi's fear when he saw the discolored, swollen arm. He was terrified he'd altered something in such a negative way. As he turned down the next street, he watched as lights slowly flicked off in the houses. It was late. Normal people would be asleep. Normal people wouldn't be stalking the roads, trying to get his thoughts in order, his emotions under control. What kind of ninja was he? He used to be emotionless, a true soldier. What happened to him? His kids. He got Genin, that's what happened. He got something to live for, something worth letting his emotions out, letting himself care. They were his everything. When he finally returned to Tajuna's house, Naruto and Sakura were sleeping on each side of Sasuke, and Tajuna was sitting at his dining table, a glass of sake in his hand. Well, that was eventful. He snorted at his own joke before swallowing the entire shot in one go. Pinky cut a leg off, Broody nearly got killed, and Blondie has some strange power. Anything else I should know? Kakashi shook his head. Here. He slid a cup in front of Kakashi, pouring a shot of sake. Why didn't you finish the bad guys off? Kakashi swallowed the sake, relishing the burn it left behind. People aren't born bad. They are made that way, which means it can be undone. He paused, trying to get his words in order. He cares about that boy. Seeing him so hurt, I think it will change Zabuza. Tajuna nodded, pouring them both another shot. You felt bad for them. You're an interesting ninja, Kakashi. Never met one who cared the way you do. Hope it rubs off on your kids. Downing that shot, Tajuna pushed himself up. Honestly, I think it already has. As the old man left the room, climbing the stairs to his bed, Kakashi swirled the sake around in the small cup. He turned around, looking in the room as the three sleeping children, his heart tugged. That's what they are. Children. No matter how strong they are, how well trained, they are still just young and naive. How could he not see it before? He was so blind, then. Swallowing the sake, Kakashi entered the room his kids were in. He pulled the futon next to Sakura before kicking his sandals off and stripping his flak jacket off. His head was pounding, his muscles burning, as he laid down. Facing the kids, he watched as their chests moved as they breathed. They were alive. They made it through. For now, that had to be enough. He had another month before the next hurdle, before the Chunin exams. For now, however, Kakashi was just going to enjoy them. He would train them up, make sure Sasuke knew Orochimaru was not the answer, and spend as much time with them as he could. Kakashi drifted off to the sounds of the kids breathing, safe and alive. Check the description for the links to the author.